is the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I'm your host, Vin Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm joined again, co-hosting by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. How you going, Pete?
I'm doing really well now, especially now that I've learned how to do my hair in a spectacular way from you, Vin.
Oh, come on. We're not supposed to talk about the pre-chat.
It's all good.
The pre-show chat
it's all
stuff.
Good. No, Vin, this is like we need to tease this so someday the listeners will hear the story about how to do your hair.
That's going to be the Christmas show. Just shh, right?
Okay,
and then in the Christmas show, I might break out Criggly. You know who Criggly is?
I have no idea.
Criggly and Macca, when I break into my real Ocker kind of alter ego. No.
Oh, that.
No, we'll leave that one for the Christmas show.
I'm going to need a lot of eggnog for that.
Oh, you're going to need more than eggnog. All right. Now, before we get too sidetracked, we have two very special guests today joining us from separate corners of the United States. And the first off, we have Dan Goldstein, who's the CTO of Cherry Audio. Now, Cherry Audio is a highly respected software developer specializing in recreating emulations of much-loved analog classic instruments, as well as developing some of their own innovative and highly acclaimed synthesizer designs. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having us.
You're most welcome, mate. And last but not least, we have Mitchell Sigman, who's the lead designer over at Cherry Audio as well. How are you going, Mitchell?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm very happy to have both of you guys here. Now, look, just before we get into it too far, I always start the show by saying, okay, where have I crossed paths with the company? And it's only been pretty recent comparatively to some of the other guests that we've had on. And now, Cherry Audio first came into my sphere, I think it would have been with the first the virtual modular stuff that you guys did. So probably about 5 years back is when I first stumbled on you guys. But the instruments that drew my attention more was when you started releasing, we'll call it reviving, and some of the classic analog stuff. And it's also some of the classic analog stuff that is not the usual go-to, if you know what I mean. Everyone else is kind of going to the usual suspects. You guys were kind of focusing a little bit more on some of the more still absolutely legendary synths, but lesser known. And I have to admit, my first thought was when you guys started releasing this stuff, and I kind of mentioned this in our pre-chat, was that it was really well priced. And it was I'm thinking, well, how good could this possibly be? Well, I got my answer as soon as I started playing with them. I mean, they're not only good, they're actually exceptionally good, guys. So
thank you.
That is probably a good segue into if we can get an overview from both of you guys, and we'll do you one at a time, of your history with music and technology and how you guys, your paths merged at Cherry Audio. Can we start with Dan first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Off you go.
So I started out as a senior developer at Sonic Foundry back in the late 90s. Sonic Foundry was a pretty innovative software company that was doing music software for Windows at a time when there really wasn't other professional music software for Windows. And probably our most famous product back in those days was Acid, which introduced the whole concept of creating music with loops and having loops that could automatically change tempo and key to match other loops. And it was incredibly innovative. And we also had Vegas, which was an early DAW that became a video editor over time. CD Architect, the SoundForge audio editor that I still use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
A lot of great software, a lot of great experiences, and it was fun doing this sort of revolutionary stuff. And later on, I found this little company called Acoustica that had some very simple recording software, and they wanted to expand their software line. And that was a really interesting experience for me, because I came from this background of really powerful professional software, and Acoustica's whole spin was easy to use, very user-friendly software. And so together, we sort of worked together to create this software called Mixcraft, which is to this day a very, very popular music recording software. And so we sort of took the approach of making the interface and the user experience very easy to use, while still having all the power of a DAW. And this is before GarageBand existed. This is before the idea that software should be accessible and not just for audio engineers. And so I think we were really kind of innovative in making music software musician friendly. And then we launched Cherry Audio. We wanted to start doing more professional musical instrument products, and so we launched Voltage Modular, which is this massive open modular synthesis environment that anyone can develop modules for. And that just grew over time into this massive system that has thousands of modules and dozens of developers.
Wow.
And then back in 2020, we launched our first standalone vintage synth product, which was the DCO 106 based on the Juno 106.
Yep.
And from the start, we wanted to make these products extremely affordable so that any musician could afford them. And so we launched that first one, and it just took off like a rocket, and we have been nonstop. We are about to release our 30th instrument.
Yeah, amazing.
Very in just a matter of a few weeks. So yeah, we've been extremely busy.
Yeah.
That's quite that was quite a few popular names of products there that you've had in your background. So, I mean, I think a lot of the listeners will be familiar with Acid and Mixcraft, of course.
Yeah. So let's roll back a bit, because through the 90s, I was all over the Sonic Foundry software. So SoundForge in those 90s, with the stereo editors, there was two main competitors. There's a couple of others, but the two main competitors was SoundForge and Wavelab, if you remember that from the Steinberg guys. And I had both of them, and being a Steinberg user with the Cubase side of stuff, the actual editing in Wavelab I preferred, but they could never get their shit together. Seriously, right? With the CD writing engine. It was a nightmare, guys. Right? Every time, if I built a new system and there was a different model of a CD burner, forget it, mate. You're basically jumping through hoops. You're changing registry entries. And I'm like, oh, God, can you guys just get this together? So, like, I might be doing all the editing in Wavelab, but then I'd finish off the project and then it would go into SoundForge and CD Architect, just simply to finish it off, So I remember that one. Acid was an interesting one, because I remember when it first came out, it was probably a little bit ahead of its time, Dan, do you think? Because a lot of people didn't know what the hell it was when it first landed.
Sonic Foundry had a really tough time with the marketing when the software first came out. It was really difficult to explain in a full-page ad in Keyboard Magazine just what this software did. People didn't know about loops, and it was a whole new way of composing music. I mean, today it's standard in every DAW, and
yeah, pretty much.
It's how music is made now. But at the time, it was very innovative. So the product launch was really kind of rocky, because no one knew how to talk about it. But if you used it for 5 minutes, I mean, that's all it took was 5 minutes, and you went, oh wow, I get this. I can make music with this. This is fantastic. And so word of mouth spread, and people started talking about it, and eventually people got it, and it became a studio staple. But yeah, it's a challenge to release something that's innovative and new sometimes.
Yeah.
And thankfully it did take off.
Yeah. Was it using recycle technology?
Oh no, this was before. Acid was really the first software of its kind that did this. Before Acid, you had to have samplers, hardware samplers, and they still didn't do the sort of high quality pitch modification and tempo modification that Acid could do. It's just a very, very innovative product. At the time, loops were known as acidized loops.
That's right.
I don't know if you remember that term.
Yes,
but
100%. Yep.
you used to buy libraries of acidized loops, and yeah, they were really the company that started this.
Yeah. So I'm just cross-pollinating between that and the recycle loops as well, which became probably a little bit better known, dare I say that. But
I think there was a pretty different underlying technology, because with recycle, it just chopped them up into bits and then just took the individual bits and played them back faster and slower kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah, so this was different again. And then Vegas, there was so many doors kind of hitting at that time, you know. But Vegas didn't have MIDI. Am I correct in saying that?
No, Vegas was a strange product. Most people don't remember this, but Vegas 1.0, the initial release, was an audio DAW.
Yes.
And no, it didn't have MIDI. It was early. It was before virtual instruments and effects. It might have supported DirectX effects, which was a very, very early Microsoft technology.
Yep.
But it was ahead of its time. And what happened was Vegas 2.0 came out with video editing features.
Yeah.
And then the software just became a video editor, and it became a serious video editor. I mean, TV shows and commercials and movies are made sometimes in the Vegas environment to this day.
Yeah. So it kind of pivoted. And just quickly, just staying with Sonic Foundry just for a little bit. I'm trying to remember. They went through a couple of acquisitions, and I can't remember who the first one was. But
they were sold to Sony.
There was Sony, yeah. Sony was first.
They were sold to
Magix. That's the two that I'm thinking of.
I'm not sure who owns it now, but
no, they're still at Magix. Still at Magix.
Okay, maybe they are. Yeah. It's so basically what happened. The real quick version is during the .com boom, Sonic Foundry got caught up in this .com boom where people were investing insane amounts of money into so many technology companies. And because Sonic Foundry had something to do with MP3, and MP3 was a major keyword at the time, and they were a public company, people started buying up the stock, and it went through the roof, and the company grew and grew and grew. And then at the end of 2000, all of that collapsed.
Yeah, bust.
Almost everybody got laid off, and all the assets got sold to Sony. So it was a very strange ride, but it was an amazing company to be a part of. Everyone there was in their 20s or maybe early 30s, and we were all highly caffeinated, and we all felt like we were pioneering new technology. So a lot of friendships came from that company, a lot of great memories, and I'm still in touch with a number of people that I worked with. They're some of my closest friends to this day.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And look, Sonic Foundry is probably one that I should have on my list for music tech pioneers. So maybe we can investigate that a little bit further later, Dan. Now, and so just quickly with the Mixcraft DAW, look, that's one that I've been familiar with it, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't ever fired it up, only because I was just surrounded by so many of the others, and obviously you've got a very dedicated user base because it's still around. I think they've just released. They've done a new release recently, a new GUI.
Version 10.5. It's been going for 21 years now. It's very popular in schools and home studios. It's really easy to use, and it's not expensive. It comes with a huge library of loops and sound effects and plugins and instruments, and it's just a great package, especially for people that are new to all this recording technology. It's very, very user friendly to this day.
Yeah. Now, awesome. Now, just one other thing, because Mitchell is waiting there very patiently. We'll get you.
I got all day.
We'll get to you, Mitchell.
It's all right. Yeah, it's all right.
Now, one thing that I noticed in your history, Dan, is you initially developed an analog modeled oscillator. Now, that was early 2000s, wasn't it? And that was the foundation behind the voltage modular and what you're doing now.
That's right, yeah.
Do you want to give us some background on that initial development?
Sure. In 2004, or maybe even 2003, I bought a synthesizers.com modular, 22-space modular synthesizer. That was my first real introduction to modular synthesis. And I was fascinated by it. I still have it. In fact, I have 66 spaces of .com modular stuff now. But I loved it. And I immediately got to thinking there should be software that does this. And there wasn't. And so I decided to create some software. And without getting too technical, one of the big challenges with doing digital synthesis is aliasing and the problems that come from sample rate limitations and things like that. So I wasn't an expert DSP programmer at the time, but I decided I was going to dive into doing it. And I had this idea for how to build an analog sounding oscillator that had no aliasing, that was completely alias free. And so I developed that, and that became the basis for this modular synthesizer prototype. And then I added more and more modules to it, and I ended up creating this whole environment that was, a complete software modular synthesizer that you could add essentially unlimited cabinets and modules to back in 2004.
Right.
And I never knew what to do with it. It just kind of sat on my hard drive for a really long time. And if you want, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about this now or later, but I can sort of tell you how I eventually went from that prototype to what became Voltage Modular.
Well, let's leave that one so we can just get a bit of that timeline. We can segue into that one. But obviously, you must have some programming chops. So pre-working at Sonic Foundry, have you got some computer programming expertise?
Oh, yeah. I have a degree in computer science from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. I've been programming computers since I was 8 years old.
Well, there you go. Right. Okay.
Back in the days of the Texas Instruments TI 99 4A. My parents bought me one when I was a child, and I remember
during the fire sale, or when it was popular before that.
I think when it was popular, when before they discontinued it.
My father showed up with one when they were like $40 in a bin at like Kmart at the time. So yeah,
absolutely, at Kmart they blew them out. That's right. No, I remember my parents brought this thing home, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I remember my parents saying to me, I said, "How do I use this?" And they said, "Well, first you need to learn how to read." And I said, okay. And then my grades went way up at school, and my parents got called in by the principal, and they wanted to know what had changed because my grades were suddenly really good. And it was just this computer. It was so fascinating to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Hey, there you go. So that was a bit of a hole in the backstory. I'm going, well, yeah, okay, this guy's able to program, understand physical modeling back in, before physical modeling was, it was just right in the early days of the physical modeling. And I'm thinking, well, I should ask him whether he's got any, whether it's self-taught or whether you've got some coding knowledge there.
No, I've been, so musically, I'm largely self-taught. I've been playing, I played in a band in college, and I played in the orchestra and in grade school and high school. And so I've always loved music. I've always loved playing instruments. And then, and I always loved synthesizers, but in the late 90s, when I was at Sonic Foundry, I discovered analog synthesizers, and I discovered the ability to create your own sounds, and that was life-changing to me. And so I've had these two passions of computer programming and synthesis and music, and I've been, I think, extremely fortunate to be able to make a career out of the things that I love doing, that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, they all collided and merged. Perfect. Yeah. Hey, I think Mitchell's been waiting there very patiently. Hey, Mitchell, do you want to?
Oh, hey.
Do you sorry, I thought I'd, just in case you'd kind of nodded off there for a second, but hey.
No.
Do you want to give us an overview of your history with music and technology? And you've also got a pretty extensive music performance and musical performance career as well. So do you want to give us a little bit of an overview on that? And you've got some other irons in the fires as far as, journalism and that type of stuff as well.
Yeah. So I guess I'll do the earlier part semi-quick because nobody wants to know about my childhood that much. But basically, I grew up in a really musical household. I was the only musician. I was the youngest kid, but my parents took me to all kinds of rock concerts. I always brag that the first concert I went to was the Police on the Synchronicity tour.
All right,
because
cool.
whenever you play hey, what was your first concert game? I always win because it's always something stupid with other people. So my parents took me to a lot of shows. My dad was into stereos. It was just always in the house. So it was kind of a natural thing. And then like sometime around 1982 when I was 11, MTV landed and then it was, Duran Duran and Flock of Seagulls and ABC and Human League. And I just totally fell for it. Even before that, my family listened to lots of rock and roll. They were not square parents. So there was that, and that segued right into super English new wave onslaught.
Yep.
And so I got my parents to buy me this Casio keyboard, a Casio MT40, if you're keeping track.
Woohoo.
And I still have it.
You still have it?
I still have it. It still works.
I was about to say, does it still work? Yeah, there you go.
It does. Yeah. I have all my old keyboards. I had that. Then I got a Casio VL Tone, the little tiny one.
Yep.
And then I got the Radio Shack Moog ConcertMate MG1, which I did get when they blew them out. They were $249, and I scraped together every penny from paper route. My mom helped me and everything. So, and again, still have it, still works.
Now, is that just real quickly? Is that because I used to have a Micro Moog back in the day? Is that the same thing?
No, it's really similar to a Rogue. It's like a sort of Radio Shack consumer version of a Rogue.
Right. Okay.
And it's got like a poly section, but the poly section is like a divide down square wave only. It doesn't sound so great.
Yep.
But it does have the Moog filter, and it's, analog. And for a 13-year-old, that was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just super into that. Just got the way Dan is describing his computer programming experience is me playing Flock of Seagulls on my Casio.
Right.
So I became a virtuoso one-fingered keyboardist.
Right.
And and I still am. So I was super into music. My folks were supportive. That was great. And so just stayed in music, started playing guitar, started playing bass. My family moved from Detroit, Michigan to like Los Angeles area when I was like 13 or 14, which was great as far as I was concerned. Met all kinds of kids who played metal, and that made me play guitar and get into the whole eventually LA metal scene. So I sort of sidetracked into playing guitar for a long time, which proved to be very handy later on because I'm a pretty accomplished lead guitar player, which worked out in cover bands later.
Right.
But I didn't know that. And then I slid back into playing synths again. I got into like a new wave band in my 20s and just always did all of it and got into recording on a 4-track and all the things people like us do. And then career-wise, in my early 20s, I started working for a place called Sound Source Unlimited, which for those of you who remember, we used to have, they would take out double-page spreads in Keyboard Magazine.
Yes.
And you could buy patches for your M1,
Yes, 100%. I remember
SY77 and they would do them in whatever format you wanted. They had a whole plant in back where they would, you put the format on your Brother MD, whatever those things were called, MD30 or Kawai Q80 sequencer.
You know what? I'm sure, Mitchell, that I have got probably 10 or 15 of those cards sitting on my shelf for various synths.
Yeah, they did cards too.
D70, JD800. I'm sure, I think I've got some Wave Station stuff. I'm pretty sure I've got some cards from that company.
Those mini discs were all the rage, though.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So that company was started by a guy named Vincent Pattetti, and great guy, 70s, like LA rock scene guy, and he started a company. It was him and a couple other guys that broke off from Yamaha.
Right.
And Yamaha was just really kicking butt.
Yep.
And so they broke off and started this company doing patches. And some of the programmers who worked for that company program for Cherry Audio instruments to this day, which is amazing.
Yep.
And so that was a great place to be for a 20-year-old who was into Nine Inch Nails, right? And so, and I just worked the phones. I was like the guy who sold you patches. And so I was doing that, and that was a great job. And I was playing in bands and doing the LA band thing on the side. And so without going into too much detail, that company kind of folded. I just worked as a musician and recording guy, like just recording in my studio, doing demos for people, that kind of thing. Played in bands, ended up getting into the band Berlin, the 80s band.
Yep.
In 2000.
Right.
Just because I knew people who knew people in LA, and I knew they needed a keyboard player. And they said, "Oh, go play for them." And I was a huge Berlin fan from when I was a teenager.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they were huge in the 80s. So
I was. Yeah. I mean, I had seen that. It was the second concert. I said the first concert was the Police. Second concert was Berlin.
There you go.
Royal Oak Music Theater.
Yep.
So I was like exploding out of my head, and I knew half the songs. I knew how to play them from playing my Casio.
Yeah,
so I was like, I got this gig. Right. Yep. I'm going to walk in here and just
nail it.
Mine.
Yeah, beautiful.
But I played fine, but she didn't like me very much. And that trend continued for about 7 years.
Oh, really?
Yes, it did.
Wait a minute, with different people, or she just didn't like you for 7 years?
No, she didn't like me for 7 years. It was just, certain personalities just don't click. And we made it work, and she was greatly appreciative of what I brought to the table, what I could do as a performer. She completely trusted me. I did all the production stuff and made all the backing tracks and all that. So on that level, we were fine. But as human beings, it just, it was always a circus.
Yeah, you guys didn't hang out for a tea and a biscuit after the show, is what you're saying.
No, I mean, sometimes, but by and large, we just learned to accept that we were different kinds of people.
Yeah.
But that said, I don't want to disparage it. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to my music career, even if they weren't, this wasn't in their prime, right? This wasn't their heyday, but it was a great band. The other guys were really good. And she encouraged us to be weirdos. And I mean, I could show you pictures. My hair is crazy. I look like Marilyn Manson.
Right.
And she just encouraged it. The crazier we wanted to be, and the band just could be aggressive. And it was great. We'd go and play double bills, or not even double bills, like those little festival things it'd be some crusty 80s band where the guys would drag themselves out of bed with one original member. And, and it would just be bad, and we'd crush them. Yeah. And it was great. And she was great. Again, I mean, her and I were different people, but she sang great. She looked great. So I had a lot of fun playing in that band. It was very fulfilling. And plus I was the keyboard player in a synth band. So I got to be up front, and I was the guy, right?
Yeah.
So it was great.
Of course.
So I did that for a long time. And then left that after I kind of just had gotten to the point where there wasn't much else to do in it, and I just wanted to do other things. Was always recording people and doing other projects and trying to get bands off the ground in LA, that kind of thing. And ended up joining the band Survivor for like a year and a half.
Jeez, no, I've never heard of them.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you could do a whole podcast about it, because it was, as I said, when we talked before, it was very much like Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
But the American Midwest version of Spinal Tap.
This one goes to 11.
The main guy in that band, one of the most eccentric, strange guys I've ever known. Nice guy, but really eccentric and crazy rich because he's 50% of Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, of course. And he took one song.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, I flew on my plane over there. I've got a plane." Oh, you do? Okay. Like just crazy things. Oh, nice shoes. Oh yeah, I got a guy who makes them for me. They're like $800. I'll give you his number. Like, dude, I don't have $800 for shoes, dude. So just endless stories like that. Pretty amusing. So I did that for a while, and And the other really funny one was like they were sort of short for material, so they would do solos, guitar solos and drum solos and stuff. And he would say like, "Hey, Mitch, do a keyboard solo for an intro to The Search Is Over." And I'm the hired gun who just walked in.
Well, for 15 minutes.
And it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Oh, whatever you want. Just do whatever. How long? However long you want, whatever.
Just fill enough time here, yeah.
Yeah, improvising like this weird Gary Newman solo in front of a bunch of people in Indiana who are like, rock and roll, whatever.
Yeah,
people. So, anyway, so that's what that was like. And to make a long story short, a friend of mine in the Vegas area, I was still in Los Angeles, but a friend of mine in the Las Vegas area was putting together an 80s band, just a 80s cover band, and he had all these crazy ideas, and he was a pretty colorful guy, so he had all these great ideas. And he knew I was the guy to do it on the technical side, to put together all the tracks and sort of be the technical nerd. So I ended up doing this 80s band in Vegas for the entire summer of 2011, and we traveled back and forth every weekend, or every week. It was like 4 days a week.
Right.
So I was in Vegas more than I was home. And I lived in a crummy apartment like by Circus Liquor. If anyone knows North Hollywood, the big neon clown.
Yep.
I was in a crummy apartment in North Hollywood. I didn't really have anything too major going on in Los Angeles anyway. So houses were very cheap then because the market was still down from the big crash. And long story short, I realized that I could own a house in Vegas for less than my apartment was costing me in LA. So I had work in Vegas. There was obviously, I could play in bands. I could play guitar and keyboards and 80s bands out there. So I moved out to Vegas and was there for from 2011 until this year.
Ah, there you go.
So here's where the tie-in with Cherry Audio and really Acoustica comes in, because Cherry Audio wasn't a thing yet. We had a friend, Dan and I had a mutual friend in Los Angeles who's just a kind of guy who knows lots of people. He likes hooking people up. He's a connector, right? The Malcolm Gladwell thing, right?
Yep.
And he said, "Oh yeah, if you go to Vegas, you got to meet this guy, Dan. You guys are going to hit it off like a house on fire. You guys love synthesizers. You guys have to meet." So I met Dan, and Dan and I, sure enough, hit it off. And Acoustica at the time with Mixcraft was in need of somebody to help them with their documentation and help them with making how-to videos. And also, I missed a thing. Another thing I did in all those years in LA was I managed to get into writing a column for Keyboard Magazine, which is also another complete dumb luck, right place, right time, talk your head off story. And I managed to get that. And I had done this column called Steal This Sound, which was basically me just taking classic tracks and going, okay, here's how you make the sound from Red Skies at Night by The Fix. And I'd do these little articles.
There you go. And Pete, didn't we actually discuss this in the last podcast, but whether AI could actually do it? But, here's Mitchell doing it in real life.
So my timing was good. Yeah, so I was doing that column for about 6 years. Ended up being a book. We put a book together for Steal This Sound, which you can buy on Amazon, and I won't make any money. And so, but no, it was easy. So we did this book, and I had, what I was getting at is I had a background writing, and I had done some documentation before. So Acoustica needed somebody to help with their documentation. The Mixcraft manual was getting pretty out of hand, and it was a lot for Joseph, the CEO, Dan?
That's right.
The guy who owns the
CEO.
company and writes a lot of code for it. It was a lot for him to handle doing the documentation, so I got saddled with doing redoing the whole manual. So actually, I shouldn't say saddled. It was a great gig to fall into. And then they had me do a bunch of videos on how to use Mixcraft, and which entailed me learning how to work a PC, which I was swearing a lot because I'm a hardcore Mac guy. But sure enough, Mixcraft is very easy to use, so that's good. So that's basically how I ended up with the company. And I was really just working part-time, playing in bands in Vegas. And so Dan will know the timeline better than I do, but eventually they had the idea to do Cherry Audio and do Voltage, and eventually do the individual instruments. And I sort of fell into being the designer of them. It wasn't really a thing we had planned. They had a great graphic designer, but I had all along, I had always dabbled with Photoshop and with Final Cut Pro. I had made videos. Like a lot of guys like us, I'm sure, I had some sort of a skill set just to get me by with whatever work came along. So it just one thing led to another. And the guy who was doing graphics for us at the time was a great artist, but he wasn't a synth player at all. So more and more it sort of fell to me because I was a synthesizer guy and I knew, the natural way you'd want a synth to be, right? So so that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah.
I think
perfect.
That brings us up to all the Cherry instruments.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and we were discussing this pre-show as well, in that I've been wanting to do a show or chat to people that have worked in the music tech journalism for ages, and all of a sudden I've got two guests, 2 shows in a row that have actually worked in that space. So just real quickly, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but your days at Keyboard Magazine, so you were doing more tutorials. You weren't really doing reviews as such, but
I did some, but not a lot.
Yeah, and that whole thing, and again, we're not going to get too sidetracked with it, but that the music tech journalism has actually changed so much over the years.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
So what were the years that you were at Keyboard Magazine? Do you remember?
I should have looked this up. I want to say like mid-2000s to like around 2010. It was 6 years. So yes, that's probably about right.
Yeah. So were you already seeing the change in the whole dynamic in that space?
Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I was there through Keyboard's demise, and that's why I stopped doing it, because Keyboard disappeared and it was getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
and
thinner
it was to
and
a
thinner.
point where the editor was making the whole magazine himself. I mean, it was really a skeleton crew toward the end.
Yep.
So that was not great. And I know you had talked about the journalism thing, which is kind of a whole other thing. So I wasn't really part of that. They kind of let me do what I do. And also the advertisers kind of loved us because I would, pick an Arturia instrument or a whatever company's instrument, and they'd effectively get a full page ad for free. And I'd say, use the blah, blah, blah to make the, So yeah, I wasn't really subject to that. It was a pretty easy thing. Not really relevant to what you're talking about, but personally, it was a great experience for me because the guys who did the magazine, it was Ernie Rideout was the editor initially, and then Steve Fortner. And these guys they actually went to school for writing and stuff. So I would send in my column, my overly wordy column, and sometimes clumsy, and they would send it back, or I'd see it printed, and they'd send it back to me, and I'm like, wow, this is great. So it was really like kind of a crash course in very direct writing, which was very helpful later on because I've done tons of documentation for Cherry Audio, and I did the Mixcraft manual. I've revised that a couple of times, and that's like a 400-page tome. And then onto the Cherry Audio instruments and voltage. I've written every word of documentation, I think, for that. I think I've done. Well,
just a segue real quick. I discovered just this week, a website, just stumbled on it. It looks like something out of 1995, but I stumbled on this website that is synthesizer manuals. And I sent it to Pete because I know, Pete's sitting there in a cave with a stack of these synths that are listed in this website. But I was just amazed how much of that, the early, even the 70s, 80s, and 90s synths that they'd somehow scrapped together the manuals on this website. But one of the companies that was actually listed, so there's all of the classic synthesizer companies you could name, the who's who, and their listed was Cherry Audio manuals amongst all of the hardware synthesizers. Yeah, I'll send you the website. I'm like going, hey, hang on.
Well, our documentation is online. So
they've probably curated it from there. But
it'd probably be pretty easy to link it.
Yeah. I found it very interesting that amongst all of the hardware synthesizers companies, right, there was Cherry Audio listed.
Our manuals they're a lot of fun to read. Mitchell is a big fan of corny jokes, and
Nice.
Every
just the
Cherry
right
audio
amount.
manual has a lot of hidden little corny jokes in it.
You know where that came from? If you guys remember, like when Mackie was really in their
Mackie,
heyday,
yeah.
Yep.
I had a
Yeah,
CR1604 like everybody did. And Mackie always had the greatest manuals. They had
Yeah.
funny jokes, and they had like even the boxes had funny things on them.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
I had a 1402 and yeah.
Yeah, that stayed with me.
Oh man, I was just always reading the big beige Roland manuals back in the day, and those were the driest things. There was not a lick of humor
Nah.
in those.
No.
Yeah, I have
know.
that set. There's that set of like, I forgot what they call it, but like synthesis, whatever. And it comes in like a little box kind of thing. Somebody sent it.
I've actually got that. It's on my shelf. The Roland
Yeah, those are great.
synthesizer instructional thing. Yeah.
It's got like recording instructions, like how to make drum sounds on a modular. It's
Correct.
pretty cool.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
I
it's
haven't
pretty cool.
seen it in probably 20, 30 years.
They're
but
worth a lot of money now, I think.
it's on my shelf. It is on my shelf. Hopefully it hasn't rotted.
But they're clearly written by somebody who spoke English, but they are very dry. They are not fun.
Yeah, then there's not much humor in it. Well, there you go. Well, look, guys, I think let's move on. So one of the questions, and before we move on to the Cherry Audio era, one of the questions that I had going into this, and before your marketing, was it Robert, your marketing guy, who's been awesome. He's been kind of the guy that's been our middleman, kind of connecting us all before we actually hooked up.
He's great.
And one of the questions was, where are you guys sourcing these synthesizers to analog model? All right, so of course, it's Dan. So Dan, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of some of your synthesizer collection? Because is that pretty much everything that you've modeled? I'm going to take a guess, except for the PS3300, is from you've pulled from your collection or from the collection of some employees.
I think so. Yeah, I think everything we've done at this point is something that's come out of my collection. The 3300, we traveled to Philadelphia to the EMIAP museum and got to spend a couple days locked in a room.
Right.
Mitchell and I with the PS 3300, studying every aspect of it and taking measurements and recordings of every single knob. And that was a fantastic project. But I have been... For over 30 years, I've been collecting and repairing and maintaining analog synthesizers ever since the late 90s when I got a broken Juno 60 and just fell in love with the whole, grabbing a slider and making your own sound concept. When I got into synthesizers, the Korg M1 was a big deal. And so I got into all these instruments where you loaded a preset and played, and editing was this, going into menus, and it didn't make any sense to me.
Yep.
And I did that for years. I mean, I had all these Sonics and Korgs and I love them all. But then I got this beat up Juno 60 from a coworker for $100, and it absolutely changed my life. And after that, I got a Jupiter 6, and then I just started buying up and collecting these instruments. And this was at a time when they weren't worth a lot and people didn't want them.
Yeah.
And they were easier to get a hold of.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn all this history that I didn't know about. And so I started buying them and learning how to repair them. And my collection grew and grew and grew. And now it's absolutely out of control. It's just overflowing my house and storage units, and it's all over the place. But in fairness, it's not just me. Mitchell's a big collector. Our lead sound designer, James, is a big collector. We are all vintage synth guys, and that helps us a lot, because whenever we build an instrument, chances are Mitchell's got one and chances are James has one, and we can all double check every aspect, and it's always good having another set of eyes and ears on anything that we model. So when we did the CS80, we had access to 2 CS80s. When we did the Octave Cat, we had three or four of those.
Sure. That's another friend. That's not us.
Pete's having a heart attack now. Yeah.
I'm just imagining in my head how many people I need to send to your house to like carry away stuff that I want. And I'm
many.
I'm just looking through the list of things here. So 2 CS80s.
Well, I own a CS80. And then I have a very good friend that lives a couple miles away who also has a CS80 that he restored. He actually bought it as a broken pile of garbage and completely restored it.
Now it's only a semi-broken pile of garbage.
Right. Now it's a working pile of garbage. No, but so having 2 units is great because any 2 analog synths can have very different responses.
Oh, they sound completely different.
They can, yeah.
I remember being in a room with some friends of mine and there was 3 of us with Jupiter 8s with exactly the same patch. They sounded completely. I mean, of course they had the element of the patch, but they all had their own character, and that's the difference between an analog and a digital synthesizer. A lot of people don't realize is that no 2 are going to sound the same. Well, the older ones.
That's true.
Yeah, that's what happened. Like with the Jupiter 4.
Yeah, so the Jupiter 4 is a great example because Mitchell's got one and I've got one, and they sounded very different.
James has one too.
And James has one, right? And we discovered along the way that there's actually...
That's like 50% of the world's stock of Jupiter 4s between you guys, I think. So.
There are 2 different revisions of the Jupiter 4, and they contain 2 different filter circuits.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that. I've never heard that anywhere until we couldn't figure out why the filters were so different between our 2 units. So sometimes, we have situations like that where we have to figure out what's the best sounding version, what's the best responding
It was mine.
Okay, so who has the 8 voice?
We don't own an 8 voice, but we own SEMs.
We probably do.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So I own 4 SEMs. Mitchell owns actually a prototype of the remade SEM. Mitchell wrote the manual for Tom Oberheim for the
changed it all.
SEM reissue. James has a 2 voice. I used to own a 4 voice. So we had a lot of SEMs that we were able to study to get that one right.
And SEMs sound really good. In case there's any question in anyone's mind,
they sound fantastic.
They sound really good. Yeah, it's one of my favorite synths.
Anyone should just check out the freebie that you guys have got.
Yeah.
What's it called? Hang on. Synthesizer expander module.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, our plugin does sound really good.
I have 1 SEM. I would love to have 8 SEMs. Yeah. I feel a little bit better about the whole thing knowing that you don't actually have an 8 voice, because that is like top tier bucket list synthesizer right there.
That's like the only Oberheim thing Dan doesn't have.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right, Dan?
Yeah.
But it's only 2, isn't it? They were just SEM modules stuck together, weren't they?
Well,
yeah.
There's that, and then there's a bunch of sequencing hardware and some other stuff with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I've owned a 4 voice. An 8 voice is just a 4 voice with 4 more voices.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and some of the other, this again, we had a great chat pre-show because I'm just throwing out synthesizer legend models going, right, you wouldn't have one of these, would you? And you're going, oh, yes, I've got a couple of those. I've gone, fuck off, will you? And then literally anything that I was mentioning, you either had one or you had multiple. And I'm like, But I finally stumped you on one, didn't I? But we don't have to mention that one because it's not really an 80s legend. But I did stump you on one of my bucket list ones. But you know what he does own, Pete?
You keep teasing me with the one that's not owned. We are going to clear that up.
Yeah, we will
today,
clear
right?
that up later.
Okay.
Or we'll get you to guess. But what is, and I think both of us, this is our bucket list that you don't own it. I was surprised you don't own one, Pete. What's the Oberheim that would be my bucket list one? You know my Oberheim bucket list. I love them all, but what's my bucket list Oberheim, Pete?
Is it the OB8 or the XA?
I know I love both of those, but that's a given. That's a given that Dan C just said I got 2, right?
No. I have 2 OB8s and 3 OBXAs.
Yeah, see, stop, right?
It.
Just stop.
So I've actually been giving you. Is it the Matrix?
Yeah, Matrix 12.
The Matrix 12.
How many you got, Dan?
I've got one.
Yeah, just one. Oh, just
I have
one?
a beautiful one.
You've only got one.
Nearly one.
Do you have the expander with it?
I've never owned an expander. I've only owned the Matrix 12. Never had.
Okay.
Never had.
It's hidden it's like in the bathroom closet.
Some of them are
stuffing all these
pool table,
right? Yeah,
under the pool table. That's an actual place.
Yeah. So who owns the Elka?
Oh, I do.
He does.
I've got the synths.
But I had it for a long time because I was helping model it, and that thing, oh my goodness. My studio used to be upstairs in Vegas. Carrying that thing up steps.
Oh, you're breaking your back, Mitch. Sorry, Mitchell.
Carry a Buick up the stairs. Yeah.
So actually, can I call you Mitch?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, you got, hang on. It says Mitch. There you go.
I couldn't fit all the characters in the little display thing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't let me. I tried.
So which synthesizer is the best space heater? That's the real question. Is it the CS80, the Chroma?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a CS80. The power supply in a CS80 is the size of a minivan. It
dims the lights all down the block. Dims the street lights.
All right, who owns the GX1? I've stumped him.
We don't own a GX1. But we did play one at EMEAP. We did get to spend a little time. Right. Actually, Mitchell rocked out on the GX1. That was
there's a video of me playing All of My Love on it.
You need like a white room that looks like very Stanley Kubrick 2001 with a GX1 in the middle of it.
That would be awesome.
No. You needed to play Fanfare to the Common Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that good. Hey, come on. I can note for note do the All My Love solo. So that's all I got.
It was great. It sounded just like it.
I used to play it in a cover band too.
I did own briefly. I owned something called an FX1, which looks just like a GX1, but it's based on FM. It's like a giant DX7, and it was awful.
Interesting.
What was it called?
It was an awful thing. The FX1.
FX1.
Really rare, unusual organ.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
It's a massive Yamaha with the massive speakers, just like a GX1, but sonically it's...
If you start researching it, you can find like all these YouTube videos of these weird, like Japan-only giant things that vaguely resemble GX1s. And there's always like an 8-year-old girl playing it, like some virtuoso rendition of like Eleanor Rigby or something.
I saw one of those, and she was doing the old theme from Star Blazers and Yamato and stuff like that on one of those old ones. Yep. And she was like 8. Yeah, so exactly.
Or maybe she's 28, but you just can't tell.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, the child prodigies that look 8 and are actually adults.
We'll never mistake you for 8, Vin. It's okay.
Oh, mate, I'm no prodigy in anything, but take it easy. Look, we can keep talking about some of these things because I'm just going to keep throwing some names.
Hey, I think maybe we should go through the products here, and then they can do the synth bragging related to the products. I think that would...
Well, okay, so
I can only take so much at once, right? So
I told you he's going to have a coronary, guys. So the Juno 106, that was the DC 106, Surrealist MG1. So we've already spoken about that. I actually thought it was like a micro Moog, but it's not. It's kind of like some Radio Shack Moog thing.
Yeah, that one from earlier.
I think that started out as I think Dan mentioned we should do something like the grandmother, maybe like the Moog grandmother. Right. And then we talked about it, and we're like, well, it's something they currently make, and that's kind of, we don't want to do that. And then I was like, well, it looks just like the MG1 though, kind of like, let's do that and do like some sort of freebie thing. And that's kind of where that idea came from. And I was like, I've got mine, so we can use mine, So that's where that came from. And we fixed some of the really annoying, dumb things about it. So it's actually much more usable.
Yep.
Nice. And the 106, my first real synthesizer was a HS60. The 106 with speakers in it.
With speakers,
right.
Yeah. Right. It was people hated it, so they were selling like really cheap. I actually thought it looked pretty good. But did you guys go through and simulate the dead voices or anything fun like that as part of this?
No, just lots of the Juno 106 has a lot of really interesting sonic things going on with its waveforms and the dual filters and stuff. So that was so strange. We had at the time we had Voltage Modular, and it was during the pandemic. We started giving away a free version of Voltage Modular to everyone so that people would have something to do. And
that was nice of you.
We started getting hundreds and thousands of people downloading Voltage Modular every day, and that really sort of encouraged us. And then we thought, well, maybe we should make a standalone instrument. And Mitchell and I talked about it, and we couldn't believe that no one had ever done a model of the Juno 106 for some reason. I mean, it's an incredibly popular, beloved synth, but there was no modeled version of it. And we said, well, let's do it.
Yeah, they always went for the bigger brothers, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, there were Jupiters and Moog modulars and things like that, but everybody loves the Juno 106.
Actually, the story goes back a little further, Dan, because we always forget about this, but we had the 106 module for voltage.
Right. That's really where it began. The ARP 2600 and the Juno 106 for voltage modular. Mitchell designed these modules that were essentially drop-in instruments. And of course, Mitchell designed something and then hands it to me and says, okay, just make it sound like a Juno. Okay. So I started doing it. I just jumped in and pulled out my Juno 106 and started modeling it. And it came out so good that that was sort of what started the discussion of, well, maybe we should turn this into its own plugin.
Yeah.
And in fairness, Dan originally presented the idea to me to make, we had already done a lot of modules for voltage. And he said, why don't you make like a full synth voice? And I remember I was dead set against it. I was like, that's a stupid idea. That goes against everything modular stands for. Yeah. And Dan was really insistent that I do it. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do something cool. What if I made a 2600? It's kind of semi-modular anyway. So that was kind of where that came from. Yeah. And then everyone loved it and it was really cool and it came out great. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess they're right. And I mean, it was fully modular anyway. It had all the ins and outs. And then I think this part was my idea. I was like, well, if we had the capability to do poly once we did, I think it was at Voltage 2.0, we had the ability to make poly modules pretty easily. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make a poly one. I think that was my idea. And again, I was like, well, if I'm going to do a poly one, I should not just make some random thing. Let's make it like a 106. And that's where that came from.
Right. Yeah.
Back in the day with the 106 that I had, this was, I think, late 80s when they were cheap. But you remember, like, there was all these new age crap album things with like whale songs.
And sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I sold them at Music Plus.
Yeah. I used to just leave my 106 next to the bed cranked up, and the chorus with the amp up had enough noise at night that it was like the ocean, and it was able to get you to sleep. So there's my 106 story there.
Yeah. Private Music. Remember that?
Oh,
that label?
There were a whole bunch of the stuff that used to get advertised on TV late at night.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot doing the 106. I always kind of tell the story, and this is true. We had this meeting where Mitchell and James and I said, okay, we want to make a Juno 106, but we have the opportunity to improve this any way we want to, because it's software, and people are going to want velocity. They're going to want to be able to control the volume and the filter cutoff with the velocity of their keyboard. So, we're going to want to add velocity to it. And then someone said, well, why don't we add a second envelope to it? Because one of the limitations of a Juno 106 is that you only have the one envelope to work with. And then someone else said, well, as long as we're doing that, let's add a second oscillator, because we've only got one oscillator. And 15 minutes into this design meeting, we had turned the Juno 106 into a Jupiter 8.
Essentially, yeah.
And we had to kind of stop ourselves.
And Big Mouth me was like, no.
Well, the beauty of the Juno 106 is it's so easy to use. It's so simple, and you can't make a bad sound on it. And we had just very quickly gotten out of control. And so we actually scrapped what we had done and we started over. And we realized really early on that each of these instruments, the limitations and the uniqueness of them, that's the magic. That's the soul of the instrument. And so, this is where Mitchell has just become a rock star at this design work is, when we do any instrument, we want to improve it, but we want to improve it just enough that it does what everyone wishes it could do in a modern studio environment, but it still looks and feels like the original instrument. And Mitchell is so good at knowing where to draw that line and, how to add just enough to it to make it, sometimes we make it polyphonic when it wasn't polyphonic, but we can do that with a mono poly switch and a number of voices selector. And with Mitchell's skills, he can work that into the original design so that it feels like it was always there from the beginning.
Yeah, so it looks like it was always there. Yeah, correct. 100%. Yeah, awesome. Hey, Dan, I've got one quick question. Hopefully it's quick. The whole physical modeling area. You know, we've had the guys from SoftTube on, and because that area has always intrigued me, and because to me, I'm going, okay, component level physical modeling. How do you do it? I mean, what is it? All right. So you're going, okay, there's a synthesizer. I'm going to model it. But so are you modeling each component, as in like the oscillator, then going into the filter separately, and then the envelopes? I mean, is it? You don't have to go into, you know.
Well, we're not modeling at a component level, which is to say we're not modeling resistors and transistors exactly, but it's what you would call circuit modeling. So if you look at an envelope generator of a particular synth, most envelope generators are created by charging a capacitor and discharging a capacitor. Right. And so if you model the shape of a capacitor when it charges and discharges, you can recreate the shape of a synthesizer's envelope. But then a lot of early 80s synthesizers have software envelopes, and some of those are linear and some of those are logarithmic. And then just depending on the design of an analog envelope, the timing of it might be different, the shape of it might be different. So there's a really exhaustive and frankly kind of boring process where you have to turn every knob and press keys over and over and study the waveforms and then figure out, you know, how do we design a software envelope generator that exactly creates the same curve and the same response and the same feel as any given instrument. And then, you know, that extends to oscillators and filters, and you know, filters are a huge part of the personality of any given analog instrument. Some of them are super clean. Some of them are really grungy and distorted. Some of them, like the Soviet Polyvox filter that we just emulated, are just crazy circuits made out of parts that were never intended to be used in audio filters, and just have, you know, insane responses. And so so all of that work is basically this, you know, kind of tedious, really involved, really detailed work of playing every note and looking at how a filter responds, looking at how the oscillators change as you play up and down the keyboard, and the shapes of the sawtooth waves and the triangle waves and what makes an instrument unique, and then figuring out how to model that as insanely perfectly as we can. Yeah. And so, and this is the level of work and the art, I will call it the art, that a lot of people, they'll just buy the instrument, virtual instrument, and go, oh yeah, that sounds fantastic, without any concept of what it took to actually create it. And you know, I think some of us older beards, all right, well, you know, we would actually appreciate it more, because if we've ever been in front of an analog synthesizer, those of us that have been in front of those classic analog synths and have at least some type of print on our memory of how they made us feel, and if the software instruments get us anywhere near close, you know what, you guys have done your job. And that's one thing that I immediately drew me when the first time I played the synthesizer expander module, you know, the AAVIM SEM thing that you guys have put out. Straight away I just went, wow, okay, there is, and I was grabbing the knobs and the thing's self-oscillating and it's doing everything that I remember the analog synthesizers did. I went, yeah, these guys have done their homework, you know, and that's the thing that kind of really drew me. And so that's why I wanted to hear some of the background of how you guys are actually creating this stuff. You know, that right there, the SCM, the Oberheim filter, is a great example. Most educated synthesizer people can tell you that an Oberheim filter is a 12 decibel per octave filter, and a Moog filter is a 24 decibel per octave filter, you know, a 2-pole filter versus a 4-pole filter. Yep. But if you actually study an SEM and you put it on a spectral analyzer and you look on an oscilloscope and you start studying it to the level that we have to study things, you'll discover right away that there are extremely interesting characteristics to an Oberheim SEM filter. One of the obvious ones that's only obvious once you start looking at it is when you turn up the resonance on an Oberheim SEM, the volume of the waveform doesn't drop.
Right.
Now on a Juno 106 or a Mini Moog, you turn up that resonance and the volume of the notes that you're playing instantly drops. But an SEM doesn't do that. And even the resonant peak, the sort of self-oscillation, it just gets added to the waveform. And that's because the design of the filter itself is completely different from a Moog ladder filter design or a typical 4-pole oscillator design like you'd find in a Juno. And so these things are all super important. And then the fizziness of the filter, and you can crank up the resonance but open the filter all the way and you won't hear that self-oscillation, but it adds this wonderful fizziness to the sound. All of these things define the sound of an instrument, and it requires paying attention to a tremendous amount of detail. What I love, what's so great about the team at Cherry Audio, I am extremely detail oriented when it comes to the modeling work, and Mitchell is incredibly detail oriented when it comes to the appearance and the layout of an instrument. Check any Cherry Audio instrument and the fonts will perfectly match the original hardware, and Mitchell spends so much time getting that, doing that, the fonts properly, so that everything matches. And James, our sound designer, is so incredibly detail oriented, and our 3D artist Mal is so just, we are all perfectionists, and I love that. I love that we have this team of perfectionists that, good is not good enough, and I honestly think, it is those little details that elevate an instrument from being very similar to the hardware to being, almost the exact same experience as using the hardware.
Yeah. Well, look, it's the attention to detail. So, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that the attention to detail with all of those instruments is, on another level. So, yeah. Now, just real quickly, we should move on a little bit. Because you've got so many instruments here.
Just hit some of the highlights.
Yeah. Well, we'll go through them real quickly. I mean, the Polymode was the Polymoog. So, I was never a fan of the Polymoog because I always just thought it was a preset thing. And I'm pretty sure it was a preset thing. No,
it's not.
There is a preset version. There's a preset Polymoog, but the Polymoog synthesizer is a fully programmable.
No, there's two versions of it. There was one that just had a bunch of presets and limited parameters. Then there's the full-blown one that has all the parameters that are hard to understand.
See, I never knew about the second one. I just remember that the original black one, I just thought there was some sliders.
They look the same.
Oh.
Yeah, they look very similar, actually.
Wow. Okay. Well, it didn't have the number of knobs and sliders as what I was expecting. Is that probably, if I versed that a little bit better? So it didn't strike me as like a Jupiter 8. It kind of looked like a somewhere in between synth,
Well, it's from this wonderful time period in the 70s when companies didn't know how to make polyphonic synthesizers. Before the Prophet 5, no one really knew how to make a polyphonic synthesizer. And the only one that really existed was the CS80. And they made it by just brute force. I mean, the thing is massive and full of all kinds of weird early logic chips in order to do it. The Polymoog is essentially a string synthesizer that they sort of turned into a kind of programmable synthesizer on its own, but it's so strange. And they did it by every single voice of the string synthesizer has what's called a polycom card, which is essentially a filter And what, Mitchell, an envelope generator, something like that?
Yeah, a really rudimentary filter and envelope generator, but most importantly, a wave shaper on every key so that you can do pulse width modulation and you can do sawtooth waves. But they're on these little circuit board cards with a proprietary chip. There's one for every single key, and they go into these little slots, like circuit board slots that don't work very well.
And if you sneeze, one of them will come loose. And
yeah, and then you have to open it up and you have to reseat it and pull it out and put it back in. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, I bet. I was about to say that's sounding very, very overly complicated, guys.
It was all they knew. It was all they could do until the CPU controlled polyphonic concept that Dave Smith brilliantly came up with for the Prophet 5.
Yeah. Dave definitely turned the whole industry on its head with that Prophet 5, didn't he? Yeah, amazing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Polymoog, for what it is very cool, and it can definitely make some sounds and do some things that you can't really do on other synths. It is a bear to use. It's confusing. And most importantly, it can't really store a preset. It has some built-in presets, but you can't make a sound. You can design your own sound on it, but you can't save it.
You can't save it. Yeah.
So, and you also, it doesn't have individual articulation for every key. Sort of does. I won't get into it, but because of those reasons, because it won't really store a patch that you make, and it doesn't have, the polyphony is kind of limited in a way. The Prophet came and just killed it.
Yeah.
Because it worked so much better and did what people wanted a synth to do. You could twist the knobs, hit save, and have initially 40 presets that you saved, or in later 120. So
I should point out that Mitchell and I both own Polymoogs. We both love them. They are exactly the sort of weird, not really, highly imperfect instrument that he and I both share a fondness for.
So I should say that I love Gary Newman and I love ELO. So
there you go.
They're the big Polymoog users. So
yeah. Well, look, and don't take what I said as in like a negative. For me, it didn't draw me in, and I always thought it was a preset thing. So I mean, at least you guys have kind of given me a little bit more.
Well, getting to the poly mode, the Cherry one, I definitely set out to fix a lot of the stupid about it.
Yeah.
And so you could get the sounds and do the things that are unique with it, which it does, and I won't get into it because I know we don't have time, but it does some pretty unique things. And so I set out to maintain all that capability, but greatly unstupidify the user interface.
Unravel the rest. Yeah, you unraveled the rest of it. Yeah, awesome. So we've already spoken about the 8 voice. PS20, that's the good old Korg MS-20. That came up in conversation in the last show, didn't it, Pete? The MS-20.
Yeah, MS-20 is a fantastic synth.
Yeah, a little
legendary
Korg.
filter.
Yeah, little Korg. And I'd say Dan's got an MS-20.
I've got a couple of them.
Oh, you're a couple of them.
Dan, you don't have an old one though, do you?
I do. Yeah, I've got an old one, and I've got one of those full-size Korg kits that they came out with 10 years ago.
Do you? Okay, I've got an old one. Yeah. I think the main disappointment with the MS-20, if you use one, is when you try to use the modular part. It's really limited and dumb how it's implemented, and it just doesn't do what you expect it to do. You instantly run up against, I guess it can't do that. So we kind of set out to fix that in ours and make it much more modular. It's not apparent when you look at it, but we sort of fixed that functionality.
Yeah.
We added more patch points and made it polyphonic and added effects to it. And the dual filters can be configured in different ways. And it just came out great. I mean, that instrument has so much personality to it. It's just insane.
Yeah. And the other early Korg that I really love, and it was my first ever synth, and I'm going to start getting depressed because I sold it, the Korg Mono Poly. I don't know if you guys are aware of that one.
I've got one of those.
I actually have one of those.
Oh, shut up, both of yous.
I wanted one when I was 13. Does that count?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So it's all right, Mitch. We can just sit there and go, yeah, well, we don't have one, but maybe I'll model. You guys can maybe model one. There you go.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But if you can make an MS-20 polyphonic with all that anger that an MS-20 has and still have it work polyphonic, then you can do pretty much anything.
Yeah, and that's what the PS20 is.
Yeah, I was about to say, the PS20 is polyphonic.
Yep.
So moving on, memory mode. So that's another one of my bucket list synths. The memory mode, there was only very limited here in Australia, and they were so unreliable. I mean, I had an opportunity to buy one, but to think you could literally just look at it. It would stop working. I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm not going near it, because I had enough problems with my Jupiter 8, because I had a really early Jupiter 8, and to the point where the lid had been opened so many times, guys, that we'd actually glued some of the chips in, because the sockets had become so loose that if I moved it, it would just stop. So the memory mode, that's a bucket list one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the memory mode. They are very fragile. I own 3 of them at the moment. But I own one that belonged to Chick Corea, and so
for crying out loud, Dan.
Who?
Wait for it. It gets worse.
Who's that? I never heard of him. Who's that guy? Who? Chick who?
So this particular memory mode was extremely well maintained, because Chick used it a lot and had his techs work on it. And so we use that one as the basis. That one in a memory mode plus that I have, and the plus is a much more stable unit.
What was the difference between the two?
They added a sequencer and MIDI to the plus unit.
Right. Okay.
Largely the same. They say that because of the addition of MIDI in the sequencer, the plus units have this sort of extra latency between when you hit a key and hear the note. But I don't know how true that actually is. They're both fun to play.
Dan, tell them what yours does when you turn it on.
It says Chick in the display when you turn it on.
Woof. All right. Cool. Look, Pete's. Look, I think we're going to have to kind of maybe start.
I have a Moog One. It looks like him. It looks like it, but I'm going to program a patch in it now that says Chick, so I can also feel like one of the gang here.
I should send you a picture. I actually have the Chick Corea memory Moog and the Moog One on a stand together. One above the other. They're beautiful together.
Boy, I'm sitting here going, yeah, okay, good on you. Right, yeah.
So I'm guessing that you have no plans to move anytime.
Dude.
Oh, it's my worst fear.
So Dan and I actually had this conversation, because I just moved from Vegas to Connecticut. So I had to move everything, and I became quite an expert at custom making boxes after paying some people to do it, because like you can buy boxes and customize them and look up YouTube videos. And now I probably am not right now, but back around December, I was the expert. I made these perfect boxes after some experimentation, and I had to move all my stuff. And believe me, and I have a fraction of what Dan has, but I probably have, I don't know, 15 or so or 20 synths, and probably another 15 or 20 guitars. And I had to make boxes for everything. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I mean, it was a bear to box all this stuff.
So you had a little U-Haul in the front with just like all your normal house shit, and then there's a semi following.
Semi-trailer, yeah.
My goodness, yeah, that whole move thing was a nightmare. So yeah, and I had to make a box. Like I've got like one of those Cordavox white whale organ Moog things. If you remember those. I've got one of those. I've got this little Philips organ, one of those like Philips, what they call it, full corda organ. And I had to make boxes for all that stuff, and it was such a job to have to box all that stuff. So and I'd be talking to Dan. I'm like, Dan, if you ever move, you're in so much trouble because, like I said, I have a fraction of what he has. And oh my goodness, it would be a lot.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have kept the boxes. For some reason, I used to keep the boxes for all of my synthesizers. Right. And it's like, and I've been moving houses and I've been carting around these empty boxes. I've gone, what the fuck am I doing this for? And the reason being, guys, was that if you ever sold them, if you had the original box, for some reason, you'd get more money if you had the original box and manual.
Okay, I got one that's going to kill Pete. Pete, you ready for this one?
No, hold on. I need to prep myself for yours there, but I was going to tell Vin, I actually did some research on eBay like maybe 10 years ago. and watch the prices of synths for a bit to see if they actually did sell more with the box. Because I'm allergic to dust and mold and all that crap that boxes tend to accumulate over time.
And
no,
okay,
they don't.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I did get rid of all the boxes, guys. Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, Mitch, lay it on.
So I did get rid of most of my boxes too. For like a couple of my newer synths, I've got the boxes, but pretty much I had to make them all.
Yep.
And however, I do own something I acquired in Vegas. I wanted to get rid of it for a long time, actually, because I don't actually play it, but it's kind of gross. I've got an Emulator 2 HD.
Yeah, stop it.
In absolutely showroom condition. Absolutely perfect. The guy used it in a studio there, and the day the Proteus 2 came out, he never touched it again.
Yeah.
Like he was like a
precinct
guy.
Yeah.
Old guy, yeah. Older guy.
Look, I'm a 6-hour drive from you. I think I'm going to have to get a gang of guys.
It gets worse. Well, here's the thing. Original box. With original box.
Stop it.
And it had the hard drive in it. It had like the 20 meg hard meg, not gig, 20 meg hard drive.
Yep.
But I took it out.
The scuzzy ones that sound like they're
it's not even scuzzy. It's pre-scuzzy.
Like a helicopter.
It's like an MFA
Yeah, it
drive
does.
or something like
Yeah, it would have sounded like an airplane taking off. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep moving. I didn't mean to speed bump you.
That's a lovely bit of kit, though.
If you want it, I'll sell it to you because I it's more trouble than it's worth.
Might be easier just to go up there and take you out, and then it's just to empty the place out. So I have to consider the options.
See, remember I was saying we have to kind of be a little bit vague where your exact location is, because I was, you know, there could be some kind of weirdo wanting to kind of, do a GPS track.
If they can find my house and they can get up and down, they're fine. I'm like in the woods.
Well, they got to get past the baseball bats and stuff as well, guys. Come on. Yeah.
But also, a lot of these synths are so big and heavy. Sometimes it's just like, wow, if you can actually get it out of the house, have at it.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it would be so hard to get out of here. My driveway is a quarter mile long, so good luck.
You'll probably find the attempted thief, with a broken back. 100 meters from the house. Hello, officer. I think I have the suspect apprehended.
Cause of death is polymorph.
Fell on top of me.
Right. It took 3 of us to get the CS80 into my studio.
I just stop it. So. Stop it with the CS80, will you?
Love to see someone try to steal it.
Oh yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, if you can lift it, you can have it.
Yeah, but Pete, we've discussed these ones, and they actually haven't modeled this one yet. Hint, hint. Right? Dan's got some of the biggest behemoths that I've ever witnessed here in Melbourne. I remember I told that story on the Dave Smith podcast. Remember that one? Remember where that was?
No.
That had the big road case that was actually on display and I wasn't allowed to touch it?
No, I don't remember what it was, though.
It was the dual keyboard Prophet 10.
Oh, yes.
So how many of those you got, Dan?
I have 1 Prophet 10. I have 6 Prophet 5s. And I did for about a year, I had 2 Prophet 10s, but that's ridiculous because they're huge. And I ended up selling it to my friend with the CS80 who absolutely loves it. So it found a good home.
Are these like in an upstairs or a downstairs, Dan? Because I'm just thinking about, how you have to spec a floor if you want to put like a big aquarium or something like that. Put a couple of Prophet 10s and a CS80 up there, and I think you're going to be giving your joists a workout.
Mate, they'd be taking the wall of the house down and with a crane to actually kind of lift them in, wouldn't they, if it was upstairs?
No, it's my gear is on the 2nd floor of my house, and I've never heard creaking sounds, but
my wife has told me that, when I eventually kick, like she's just going to go and have somebody clear out all my stuff because she has no idea what things. I'm like, no, these are all worse stuff. She goes, I don't care. I'm just going to want to get rid of it all.
Oh, gosh.
So Dan, I hope you have prepared contingencies for these types of things.
It's a lot of stuff. It's overwhelming at times.
But isn't that the rule? You never tell the wife actually what these things are worth?
She knows. It's all good.
I don't have that kind of wife.
I have a very, very patient wife. I did, for a little while, I had a Mellotron in the kitchen, and I think that was sort of the line for my wife. She She was not okay with that.
Yeah.
Honey, want to hear some Moody Blues?
Yeah. Look, I think we're all very lucky. Well, I'm very lucky with my wife, putting up with me at multiple levels. But it doesn't matter whether it's cars or gear. She just puts up with it because.
Yeah, we don't want to go down the RC car.
No, but that was due to my young son, and wanting to get into RC racing. But then, of course, I'm like a dog with a bone, and because I'm into cars and geometry and setup and everything else, I went a little bit overboard, Pete, as you know, right?
Mm-hmm. A little bit overboard is sort of that's. I think we've all done that.
Yeah, Dan, you don't get to talk. You have 5 profit or whatever it was.
No, what was it? We lost count of how many profits you had. Yeah.
See, it doesn't sound impressive when I tell people I have a profit now because Dan's got 5 or however many. I've got a 5 and a 10, but I have a new one. I have a new 10.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't count. Well, it does. It does. I'm sorry.
All right. So getting us back on here for a second, who's got the RE201?
Nobody.
Oh, no, I've got.
Do you have a 201, Dan?
I have a 201 and a 301.
I forgot you did. Yeah, he has a 301. I've debated getting one again. I bought one for like $350 long ago, and I could never get it working right. So but I've always wanted one again.
I've got, I think, the 301. This sounds fantastic, but don't breathe on that tape too hard.
Right.
Oh man, there's nothing better than an analog synth through a Space Echo. It's just a magical sound.
You know what you did miss, Pete, and I don't think we're going to have time today, but we were comparing ridiculous cheap instrument finds that we didn't actually buy at the time.
I used to work in a music store in the late 80s, and we had a glass case full of TB303s for like $50 each.
Yeah, you couldn't give them away. Yeah.
Blowing them out.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy any of them.
I have a really good recent one, like an actual one that I did buy, and I played it on a song a couple days ago.
Oh, there you go.
Dan always gets lucky. Dan is the guy, like he's always getting a ridiculous deal, and he's the guy you want to kill because he's like, oh yeah, I got this for $100. You're like,
Danny's throwing you under.
But every so often, I get lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dan told me how much he paid for his Matrix 12, and I almost fell off my fucking chair. I'm just like, you didn't get it for that much, did you? You don't have to divulge now, but it's like, no.
I've been doing this a long time, and
yeah, but still, that was whether was it in a garage? It was kind of like they didn't know.
Oh no, it was at a thrift. It was at a pawn shop a mile from my house.
They had no idea what it was, right? They obviously had no idea what it was.
It's a funny story. It was owned by a guy who played one of these saxophone controllers.
Yeah. The Yamaha wind controllers. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a wind controller, but it was actually like a analog saxophone that I'm blanking on what it's called.
Right,
but,
one of those 360 system things, like a Lyricon.
No, not a Lyricon.
Not an Iwi, an Akai Iwi.
It was an Iwi. It was the Akai Iwi. It was an Iwi player,
right.
And I don't know the situation. This was just at a pawn shop, but he ran into financial trouble and he ended up selling his Iwi setup and a rack of gear in this Matrix 12. And when I went to check out the Matrix 12, most of the patches wouldn't play. You'd play the keys and nothing would happen. And it occurred to me that these patches had probably been created to respond to the Iwi, so that when you blew into the Iwi, the volume would rise, and without the Iwi connected, the volume was at nothing. I didn't know that for sure, but that was my guess. So I took a chance on it. I got it pretty cheap because it wasn't working the way it was supposed to. I brought it home. I looked up the reset. There's you hold down certain keys and turn it on and reset the settings, and boom, it worked perfectly after that. So that was a very Las Vegas sort of lucky thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
That was a great day.
Yeah, Vegas, you can find things that, you wouldn't ever get in Los Angeles or New York. That sampler I was talking about, good example of that. You would have never found that there.
Yeah, because people have lost their ass at the casinos. They've lost the seat of their pants out.
There's a lot of retired musicians. There's a lot of musicians that retire to Las Vegas and bring their gear with them. I mean, I've bought Wurlitzer pianos that And what's fun about it is they always come with a story. So, some guy's like, oh, I dragged this piano around all the clubs in Chicago in the 70s. And, and now it's in his garage and he's selling it to me. And, now it's mine.
Dan, can I tell my mini story?
Yes. Yeah, go for it. My goodness.
So before I left, wasn't that long ago. It was like a year ago. An older bass player guy I played with in Vegas sends me this Facebook marketplace ad, and it's a Mini Moog. And it's $800.
What?
And I'm like, okay, this is like a year ago. Less than a year ago. In Vegas. In North Vegas, which is very close to where the garbage dump is, if that tells you anything about North Vegas. Not the nicest part of Vegas. And so, of course, I just think it's a scam. This can't be right,
Yeah.
And so, long story short, I message the guy, I call the guy, and I'm like, can you send a picture of the serial number, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm trying to think of ways to, make sure I'm not going to drive up there for nothing. And he does, and he just sounds kind of, okay, whatever, yeah, all right. And I go over there, and sure enough, it's a dark room in this dark house, this dingy old house. And the guy's like, yeah, I used to play. He's a guitar player. He's got like his Pink Floyd shirt with the tie-dye. And he's like, yeah, I used to just hit notes on this thing and play over it and stuff. And I can tell he has no idea what he has. And so he plugs it in, and it's a little wonky keyboard-wise because it hasn't been played in a while, but it all works. So sure enough, he wanted $800 for it. I pulled $800 out of my pocket, handed it to him, and got out of there fast. So when I gave him the money, like I think he got this funny look on his face, like he might have known, like, why isn't this guy haggling at all? But I just figured I probably could have given him $500 for it. But I figured I would have been struck by lightning. Yeah. So just got out of there, and it needed a little bit of work, but not a lot. And cosmetically, it's nice. It's like I can't remember what year we decided it was. Dan, did we figure out it was like a 75? 76.
Right. Yeah.
But it's nice. And $800. So, but I mean, those things are, once in a blue moon does that actually happen.
Rare,
believe me.
Yeah.
Well, except
I'm
for
not
you
the guy
guys.
who's getting no, I get those deals once in a blue moon. Dan's the one. He's always finding crap. But that was one time when it happened.
Can I tell my best Vegas synthesizer story?
People are jumping off cliffs listening to this right now. Okay,
do you guys know what a Roland System 100 is? Not the 100M, but the System 100. It's got the keyboard.
That's what I got the books and the manuals. That was based on the System 100. The instructional stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a synthesizer, and then there's an expander unit, and there's a sequencer unit, and there's a mixer unit, and then there's a couple little speakers.
Yeah, it's not the fully modular one.
Right. That's right. It's semi-modular. This is many years ago, but there was an ad somewhere, someone selling a System 100, and I jumped on it. I couldn't believe it. And I drove across town, and I got to this guy's house, and I said, hi, yeah, I'm here to look at this System 100. And I walk into his house, and he's got all these big speakers. He's got these huge speaker cabinets. And he says, yeah, come over here and take a look at it. And we walk up, he takes me to this area of this room, and the mixer section of the System 100 is sitting on a table. And he says, yeah, I use it to mix my karaoke. I do karaoke. And so I use it, like a neighbor gave it to me. And so I use it to mix karaoke. And I said, okay, well, what about the rest of it? And he goes, oh, you mean like the keyboard thing? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, I don't know anything about that. That's just on the floor. I don't use that. I use this mixer for my karaoke. And so I think I paid him $800 for it. He wanted to throw in a couple speakers with it. And I said, no, you can keep these giant karaoke speakers. I just want the mixer and the other keyboard stuff. And he goes, yeah, okay. Nice. So that was probably the best find.
I wonder if there's a section in that Roland Synthesis Techniques, book thing on how to use your System 100 for karaoke applications.
Well, I'm going to drag it out now, Mitch, and if I find it, I'll just photocopy and
Thank you.
Photocopy. Hey, I'm showing my age. I'll scan it and send it across.
Yeah.
For you. Oh man, I don't even know what we're up to. Hang on, I'm completely lost.
So we should get through. Yeah, we did a bit of 2021. Need to do some 2022 here.
Well, there's an ARP quadra there, I'd say, that'd be in Dan's collection.
Yeah, we'll be here all week, though, if we do all of them.
Yeah, we might be.
Yeah. But just the ARP quadra, that's one of yours, Dan, is it?
Yeah.
We had, neither of us, Mitchell, myself, James, our sound designer, none of us had ever been in the same room with a working quadra. And Mitchell, I'm sure it was Mitchell's idea to do the quadra. And so we just bought one. We went and found one and bought one. And it arrived at my house. I opened it up and there were things rattling around inside of it. It turns out you have these maybe they're AA batteries that had fallen out and were stuck under the keyboard, and I had to dig them all out and put it back together. But it works. It to this day works beautifully. Yeah. So we actually bought one solely so that we could model it, because it's one of these instruments we'd always been fascinated by, all of us.
Yeah, rare as.
I just wanted to do it because it looked cool.
Yeah.
It is a gorgeous synthesizer.
But the UI is comically bad. Like their horrible attempt at patch storage. I mean, when I call that patch storage, it's not really fair to patch storage everywhere else. It's just horrifically bad. But we got rid of that and, fixed that.
But it is such a beautiful synthesizer, though.
Yeah, they're cool.
Is that the one that it ended up being released as a Rhodes? Was that?
No, that's the Chroma you're thinking of.
I'm thinking of the Chroma. Yeah.
The Quadra it's just interesting because ARP was, I think, starting to have some financial trouble.
As all of them were.
Yeah, exactly. They needed a product quickly. So they took the string section from the Omni 2 and the synthesizer section from the ARP Solus, which is a SOLUS, very rare synth. I have one, by the way.
Nice.
And they basically shoved these things together to make the Quadra. It was a string synth. It was a bass synth. It was a duophonic lead synth, and it's actually phenomenal. It's really, really cool, but something of a flawed instrument.
A lot of these instruments like that, and like the Polymoog, and like a lot of these instruments, in my mind, I always call them like things that people hated when they were out because they were really weird and oblique and prone to breakage. But my point being, you think if this was my only keyboard, if I had this and a Rhodes and I had to go do a gig, this would be the suckiest thing ever. And we don't think that way because we don't have to do that, right?
Right.
Nobody's had to do that for a long time. We've had cool stuff that works. You could take an M1 to the gig. Great. Perfect. But as things that do the unique thing they do, whatever makes them unique, they're awesome and fun. And that's why a lot of these make great plugins, because when you buy Cherry Audio Quadra, it's not your only instrument. You have 37 other instruments. So that's what makes them a lot more viable. But at the time, when I think about the idea of taking like a Quadra or a Polymoog to a gig, if they even work when you put them, by the time you've moved around, they're such a pain in the butt and so impractical and so bad at doing live show and putting it in historical perspective. If you think about a Prophet 5, when it came along, this was the greatest thing ever. It was like manna from heaven for playing a gig because it did exactly what you needed. So that's kind of why we resuscitate a lot of these things.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is really what motivates us. And, it might sound cheesy, but owning these instruments, owning a Quadra, owning a Polymoog, it's an exercise in frustration because things break. You're constantly opening them up and reseating cards and repairing these things. It's not necessarily fun to own some of these vintage instruments unless you are really prepared to put in the work and the money and the time and the effort to keep them going. But for us to be able to take these things and make them available to everybody, to every musician at a price that everyone can afford, it's an honor for us. It's something we love doing. It's kind of amazing that we get to go to work every day and do this and make these instruments accessible to everybody. We are very fortunate to own these things, but we understand that many people will never be in the same room with something like an ARP Quadra, and now everyone can play it. Everyone can see what it's like.
Yeah. Well, you would say the majority of us will never be in the same room as an ARP Quadra. I mean, I don't think I've ever actually physically seen one.
Quadra, Trident, there are a couple of that are along the same vein that I've always been really interested in.
Trident is too.
And to add to what you were saying, Dan, a lot of people I don't think realize that getting one of these is like having a really expensive pet or even like a child, where it's not like you get it, somebody tunes it up and it's good. It's like, no, it needs regular checkups and tuning and fixing. And
yeah, it's like owning a Model T. Yeah, you're constantly, looking for parts, and some of the parts are impossible to find. Sometimes you have to get a lesser instrument and tear it apart in order to get these chips that that are just unfindable. But yeah, for $49 you can get the Cherry Audio Quadra and have exactly the same experience, plus we've added effects to it and additional features, and it just motivates us so much.
Fixed a lot of stupid on that one.
Yeah. Let's move on quickly, and I think I'm going to take Pete's advice, because if I go through every synth, we're going to be here for 5 hours.
We'll be here all day.
Yeah. Let's move on to some of your original designs. So the first one was the Dream Synth, which is a hybrid analog digital of the 80s, inspired by the synths of the 80s. So who would like to give us an overview of that one?
Dan, you want to talk about it? Because I'm going to yap about Harmonia for 6 hours.
Yeah. So Dream Synth was, I think, our first original instrument.
It was Dan's idea.
It sort of evolved from my original idea, but I had this idea of combining digital sample playback, like Korg M1 era digital samples, with an analog string synth, because I love string synths, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be able to bring in that string layer on top of very digital samples, which can be very different sounding from an analog synth, and then merge all that together through reverb and delay and an analog filter. And then Mitchell sort of took that concept and brought it to some amazing new places. Every oscillator can load 2 different digital waveforms and then sweep between them. And so in total, I think you can have, 6 total samples loaded? You
can have 6 waves plus the string synth.
String synth.
Wow.
It's a lot. Yeah. I'm always trying to turn everything to a wave station. So, and it's really not, if you look at it, you wouldn't think that, but when you look at it through kind of like, you can kind of vector between 2 waves. That was the idea. So anyway, Dan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There you go. Or a Prophet VS. Yeah.
And then we ran all that through an Oberheim SEM style filter with the notch mode and the high pass mode and the band pass mode, because we figured you don't need a lot of intense filtering in this. So we thought that 2-pole filter would sort of emphasize things without it being overly filtered. And anyway, we combined all that with an arpeggiator and a bunch of LFOs, and it's actually one of our most popular instruments, and it's so different from a lot of the other things that we do. People seem to really love the huge range of sounds that it makes.
It's really fabulously good for like stacked 80s, like Depeche Mode, like, Question of Time kind of sounds, like, or Music for the Masses. Those big digitally kind of piled up sounds are so ridiculously easy to make on it. You can almost like randomly just select a bunch of waveforms, stack them up to tune them a little bit, pan them, and like, hey, cool. Like it's really nice for that.
Yeah, nice. And the other original design is called Signs.
Well, we have Signs and Harmonia.
Harmonia, yeah. But I was getting to Harmonia.
Yeah, that's Mitchell's design.
That's one of your latest ones, though, isn't it?
It's all a blur. We've done
last year.
Last year, yeah.
You want to talk about Signs first?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So Signs was, that was my idea. I had this, I don't really know where the idea came from, but I started experimenting with starting with a sine wave and then looking at all the things you could do to a sine wave to change it into other waveforms. So if you modulate a sine wave with itself, FM style, like DX7 style, you can turn it into a sawtooth wave or a ramp wave. If you overdrive it, you can turn it into a square wave. If you run it through a wave shaper, different wave shaping things that you can do, you can turn it into a big distorted, just a massive distorted sound. You can change the phase of it. You can change the width of it. And so anyway, I came up with this whole list of things that you could do to a sine wave. And then as an experiment, I built a module for Voltage Modular that allowed you to do all these things to a sine wave. And I thought it was really interesting. And I showed it to Mitchell and James and let them play with it. And then we said, do you think there's an instrument here? Do you think we could do something with it? And I was really pleased that both Mitchell and James were really excited about this idea. And we ended up designing a whole synth around this wave shaping sine wave concept. It's a 4 oscillator synth, so you can combine 4 of these things together. Plus, every oscillator has a sub oscillator, a super oscillator. They can all be panned in stereo. There's 4 envelopes. There's 4 LFOs. There's a mod matrix. There's distortion and all kinds of effects. And not to pat myself on the back, but when the sound designers got a hold of it and we started hearing what they could do with it, it just blew my mind, some of the sounds that come out of that instrument.
So it's very different to FM though, isn't it?
It can do FM. It can
that's
totally do
FM.
One of the things it can do is you can do classic 4 operator FM, but it can do so much more.
Right.
It goes so far beyond that.
When I first saw it, the name to me said DX, but the look of it is Oberheim. So I was quite confused as to what exactly it does.
So you can do full on, because you can modulate one oscillator with the other oscillator, you can phase modulate them. You can do spot on 4-op FM. You can make it sound exactly like a DX. However, you don't have to do that. You can use it in a much, much simpler fashion. What Dan was describing, where you just got a sine wave and you just you just play with the knobs that do the wave shaping, and you really don't need to know what you're doing at all to come up with really nifty sounds on it. Whereas if you do the FM thing, you sort of have to know what you're doing a little bit. So it's kind of got the best of both worlds.
And all of those wave shaping controls, they are all individually modulatable by the 4 LFOs and the 4 envelope generators. And so you can just make these sounds that evolve. You press the key and they start out really pure. And then over time, they evolve into these grungy, distorted, wild, complex sounds. And I'm deeply proud of Sines. I was so happy with going from, this original concept to this full blown instrument that I think is just amazing. I'm really happy with it.
So Mitch, when you get a synthesizer like this and you're working on the design for the UI, and I'm going to pick on this one just because it has some obvious influences. Are you like, oh, this is going to look really cool, this is a design I like, or is it more you're trying to evoke a particular synthesizer or family of synthesizers? Like, kind of what do you go for when doing this?
It varies. I mean, obviously, most of the instruments we do are emulations. So, the design sort of designs itself to some extent.
Right.
With this one was unique because I guess it was Dan and our former graphic artist. They sort of had some ideas on what they wanted it to look like. So this one, usually it's almost 100% me just going, I'm going to make it look like this or that or this idea. But this one, they really wanted to have this kind of wave idea. If you look at the UI on it, you can see the controls are sort of like do this sort of wave pattern, which was actually, honestly, kind of difficult to do. Get all those lines and get everything to sit in the right place and figure out how to put the modulators. So this one was tough to do, and it's been a polarizing UI. Some people love it. Some people are like, it looks funny, or there's too many knobs. The big question with this one was, we could have done it as one set of controls with pages or tabs, or we could have done them all at once. And I've actually, since then, I've sort of changed my attitude about it a little bit. But at the time, I was very much like, you have to be able to get at everything all at once and see it all in front of your face at once, which I think there's a fair amount of credence to. But you have to be careful because you can end up with 1,000 knobs on the screen. So it's balancing that. But yeah, this particular one, there was sort of a fair amount of outside influence, but I did still kind of go for like that kind of 80s emu Slash and Sonic kind of look with the bluey silvery. Like there was certainly a conscious thing there.
Yeah. Okay. It's a beautiful UI. I do like the design to it.
And also like the sliders and stuff are very Bang & Olufsen stereo influenced. I love Bang & Olufsen. I have like a vintage one that's super cool. So I always like that really high-endy kind of Scandinavian thing. So.
Yeah. And just listening to Dan about the sound creation side of it, it was almost sounding like you could dive into wavetable type of areas, the way you were saying the sounds were morphing and stuff. Am I far off there, Dan, do you think?
No, not at all. Again, everything starts out as a sine wave, but it can, the sounds can evolve wildly into, shapes that are unrecognizable. From what they started out as.
But they are all virtual. They're not samples,
right,
at all. It's just a virtual sine wave.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. So it's kind of a little bit different to a Prophet VS, with the vectoring, and I've got to explore that one a bit further now after you've just described that one.
It's actually really fun for us every once in a while to do an original design where Mitchell's not constrained by the original hardware, and we're not limited by what some design from 1982 was capable of doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And Science is just one of these examples where we just put everything into it.
Yeah.
A full-blown modulation matrix and lots of LFOs and envelopes and lots of effects. And the instrument's got, I think, 7 different filter types that you can switch between. It's one of the only instruments we've ever done that has that has, all these different filter modes. And it was just, it was absolutely a fun experience to say, hey, if we could do anything we wanted to do with this instrument from the ground up, let's do it.
Yep.
And it's a beast for sure.
Everything, including the kitchen sink.
Yes.
And it would be impossible to build that in hardware, do you think, guys? Or if it is possible,
no,
you could do it in hardware, you think? Yeah,
I think so.
All the wave shaping, everything that's done to the sine wave they're all analog processes that could absolutely be done in hardware. You might not want to copy our UI because there's got to be 300 knobs on the screen. And
I don't know. I'd buy one. I like that.
Yeah,
it'll be bigger than the a CS80, mate.
It'd be a big one.
It would be a big one. Hey, let's just quickly move on. Mercury 6.
Wait, Vin.
Oh,
Vin,
sorry.
You skipped one.
What did I skip?
The harmonium.
Oh, the harmonium.
No, harmonium's later. I've got them all in order.
Oh, you're going in order? I thought you were going
Hang on. Aren't you following my run sheet, Pete?
I am trying to.
You are. You haven't got it. Now he's going to really quickly open it up.
It's right here in front of me.
Yeah, right now it is. Yeah, good on you. Hey,
no, it's been up.
Oh, has it? Okay. All right. Yeah. Awesome. So Mercury 6, and I've got a soft spot for the Junos because I had a Juno 106, but my baby that I should never. I'm going to start getting depressed again. The Jupiter 8, and it was really interesting when you guys were discussing how you were going a bit overboard with the original design of the DCO 106, is that you turned it into a Jupiter 8, and I'm like going, oh, yeah? Have you still got that around?
No, we didn't actually make it.
You didn't make it.
The discussion.
But, I mean, the Juno 106, it's not that far off a Jupiter 8. I mean, it did sound a little bit different, DCO versus VCO from memory. And I had an early kind of, it was my Jupiter 8 was, the filters were kind of dirtier, right? But in a good way, right? It was really fat and there was a little bit of dirt to it. And I remember when I played the Juno 106, it sounded a little bit too clinical for me, which is kind of probably ridiculous. And it was like, I had a MKS 70, but I didn't have an MKS 80, but I remember playing an MKS 80, which was based on a Jupiter 6 from my understanding. Is that
kind of, yeah?
The MKS 80 is.
Yeah, that's
kind of,
MKS. Yeah, kind of. And have you got one of those, Dan?
I do. Yes.
I have 2.
Oh, shut up.
I have Rev 4 and Rev 5. Yeah.
I have 0.
So the Mercury 6, it's more than 6-note polyphony, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
16.
So yeah, I've got my Jupiter 8. Thanks, guys.
It's
16.
Obviously, it's based on the Jupiter 6, and that's a synth that is very dear to me because, as I said, when I was back in the 90s, when I got the Juno 60 and sort of fell in love with that, I went and got a Jupiter 6, and that was my first real serious analog. And it's a wonderful, wonderful synth. For some strange reason, it gets ignored because it's always the Jupiter 8 that people think about.
It lives in the shadow of the Jupiter 8.
It does, but it's an amazing, the Jupiter 6 is an amazing analog synth. There are so many unbelievably cool things that you can do with it. You can invert the envelopes, you can cross modulate the oscillators with each other. It's got all these different arpeggio modes. It's got glissando and portamento. It's got a unison mode and a solo unison mode. So you can play chords in unison mode. You can split and layer the sounds. You can have, 2 voices on the left and 4 on the right. Things that you couldn't even begin to do with something like a Prophet 5. It was a huge step forward, and a fantastic sounding synthesizer. And unfortunately, it just, as you say, it lives in the shadow of the Jupiter 8, but it's exactly the kind of thing that we love at Cherry Audio, because it's a wonderful synthesizer, and every other company ignored it, including Roland. They ignored it too.
Yeah. With their re-release recreation things, whatever it's called, Roland Cloud. I can't remember. It's something like that, whatever it's called.
Yeah, they went to the Jupiter 8 themselves and just ignored the 6 for a long time. So definitely one of my personal favorites, and it was a great synth to build, and people love it. It's one of our most popular
favorites.
instruments.
It was also the first one that we did that was 3D. With our 3D guy Mal came on.
3D and tabs. We had tabs with the effects.
Tabs.
It's a great example of what Mitchell is just so very good at, because it looks like a Jupiter 6, but it has all these effects added to it, and all these layer controls and velocity and things like that, but it still manages to look exactly like a Jupiter 6.
Yeah, it's all the elements are there. And what's interesting for me is that the MKS 80 has almost got one of these iconic legendary statuses, right? And it sounds pretty much like a Jupiter 6.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that gained all of the not the notoriety, but that gained the iconic status, where the Jupiter 6, like you said, was ignored. And seriously, that was because of I remember, because I'm owning a Jupiter 8, and I see someone with a Jupiter 6 and go, you've only got a Jupiter 6, idiot. But it was a bit of the highbrow status thing, I think,
It's just not fair. It's also historic. It was one of the first 2 instruments to have MIDI.
Yep.
Correct. Yes. When they put together, what was it?
The Prophet 600,
and
the Jupiter 6.
And the Jupiter 6. Yeah. I've got a real funny story with those first 2 things connected. And because when we were chatting to Dave Smith on the show, I said, hey, Dave, the first 2 synths connected at MIDI at NAMM, it was a Prophet 600 and a JX3P. And he goes, well, I don't know, Vin. I'm pretty sure it was a Jupiter 6. I went, okay. Do you know where I got the idea it was a JX3P? From an early interview from Dave Smith. So while I was doing my research, I've gone, right, first 2 synthesizers connected together. All right, Prophet 600, JX3P. So then I dropped that line in the show, and I'm like, I think I've just stuck my foot in it, and there's no way in the world I was going to argue.
Oh, that's funny. It's a really famous moment.
Yeah, and then I found the photo, and sure enough, there's the Jupiter 6,
Yeah, Dave Smith wanted every company to adopt MIDI, and none of the other companies would, except in the end it was Roland who said, yeah, this seems like a really good idea. So Roland built the Jupiter 6 according to the MIDI spec, and Sequential built the Prophet 600 according to the MIDI spec, and then they met at the NAMM show.
Yep.
And they hooked them up together, and they played the keys on one and the other one sounded, and that was the introduction to MIDI. And then every other company saw this at NAMM and said, oh, we want to be part of that. And they all jumped on board.
That's the game changer. Yeah.
Yeah.
1983.
Yeah, we've had Dave on the show, and if you want to hear it in the first person, he describes that whole experience leading up to how, he was trying to get the guys on board, and he was flying over to Japan, and, he was meeting up with Taro, Kakahashi over at Roland, and,
Right.
and I'm not going to, that's a great story. You guys should go have a listen, because the original idea that Taro put forward, it wasn't going to be called MIDI. And I'm not going.
Oh, really?
I'm not going to say what it is, because it's a hilarious story. So
I'm going to listen to that.
Go have a listen to that.
That moment is just so legendary to people like me, because all of this technology, everything we have today, DAWs and digital recording and just all these amazing tools that we have, really sort of stem from moments like that.
Yeah, the MIDI.
When someone said, I'm going to make this free and open and available to everyone, and sort of change the world and move things forward in some incredibly important ways.
Yeah, and the spec lasted, and still going, but 40 years. And now we have MIDI 2, very, very close to becoming the next wave. And I'm not sure whether you know or not, but Pete here is the chair of the board of the MIDI2.org. And
fantastic.
He's in charge of the MIDI 2 implementation of Windows.
I am a wrangler of cats in the MIDI Association, and I wrote half the implementation in Windows.
In Windows, yeah. So
wow.
Awesome. Pete's Mr. MIDI 2. So that's an interesting thing, and we did a show not how long ago, earlier this year, wasn't it, Pete? About the we did the whole MIDI 2 show.
Yeah.
The whole MIDI 2 show. Oh, look, I don't know. This year's been a fucking blurb. But yeah, so MIDI, that was an absolutely iconic moment, and hearing it first person from Dave, I thought that was just great. So I'll cherish that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've already spoken about the PS3300, and that was that semi-modular Korg. Man, how good does that thing sound? I mean,
it's so big.
And I'd never heard of that one, guys.
It's the fully polyphonic one, right?
Yeah. So again, it comes from that era when no one knew how to make a polyphonic synth, and Korg said, "Okay, you want a polyphonic synth? Here's what we'll do. We'll get a giant box, and we will hook every single key of the keyboard up to its own synthesizer circuit board. So we will put whatever it is, 61
or 49, however big the keyboard was.
Yeah, whatever it is, 48 synthesizer boards.
48, yeah.
But then
48.
The 3300 has 3 synthesizers per key. So it's 48 times 3 circuit boards, all crammed into this enormous wooden box in order to make a fully polyphonic synthesizer.
How big is it? How big is it physically?
Pretty big.
It's big, but it's not as big as you would think. Yeah.
No, it's not that big.
No.
Oh, a sideways refrigerator.
It's smaller than an 8-voice.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know about that.
But the thing about it, though, the gotcha is that Dan said there's 48 synthesizer boards in there, and they're like literally individual circuit boards. But the gotcha is that the oscillators, much like a Quadra or a Polymoog, it's divide down square wave oscillators like a string synthesizer.
Yeah.
And there's 3 sets of them. There's one for each panel, but still they're not genuine separate analog oscillators. Now, everything north of there, the filters and the envelopes and all that, are individual for every single key for all 3 synthesizers in there. But so it's still in a way, it's like, a string synthesizer gone mad, which is what Quadras and Polymoogs are.
It's smaller than Dan's .com setup, so.
Yeah, well, so the original 3300 is very deep in order to fit all the circuitry. This reissue one that they still haven't actually come out with, but they showed it at NAMM. I think the circuitry is much smaller.
They're doing a reissue?
They are. Mm-hmm. Weirdly enough, after we released our 3300, a little while later, Korg announced that they were going to build a limited number of PS 3300 new units.
Wow.
And that was about, I don't know, it might have been 2 years ago now.
Yep. It's been a bit.
One of them, there's a prototype, and some people have played it and made videos with it, but they never actually, they haven't done it yet. They haven't released anything.
It's $478,000.
I think it was like what, $12,000 each or something like that. Yeah.
They never announced an official
That's the number. Yeah.
They never said. There's rumors and numbers going around, but Korg has never actually put a dollar amount on it.
I can imagine. And now I'm almost scared to ask, Dan, but do you have a Moog modular?
I have a 1969 Moog 2P system.
Why do I know, Pete? Wait, just why did I know that? I'm just going to say, do you have a Moog modular?
I've got my Moss Lab recreations. That's what I'll have to live with.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, Seb makes some really cool stuff.
I've got a .com as well. Yeah.
So there was in the 60s, there's a guy named Rick Powell who kind of famously made these. He made an album called Switched On Country. This was when all the switched on
on Bach.
You could get switched. After Switched On Bach, though, there were a whole bunch of really cheesy, switched on rock and switched on whatever.
Switched On Country. I don't know if I could.
Switched On Country is not a great work of art. I don't know a better way of saying it. But anyway, this guy, Rick Powell, recorded Switched On Country and a couple other records, and I own his Moog modular. It's actually pictured on one of his LPs, the exact unit that I own. So that's one of the coolest things I own. I'm very proud of that.
That's like a rescue animal at that point, right? So,
I mean, it's not exactly Keith Emerson's Moog, but... it did make what might be the worst version of I Walk the Line that's ever been recorded.
Good grief.
The best sounding synth making the worst sounding music.
Yeah. I highly recommend everyone out there just look up Switched On Country, I Walk the Line to hear the pinnacle of
don't do this.
What synthesizers could do in 1970. It's
Let's go listen to some Tomita instead, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, my introduction to the Moog modular, and Pete hadn't even heard of this band, but one of my most influential bands in the 70s, because I'm a bit older than you guys, was a band called Angel from Los Angeles, right?
Oh, of course I know Angel. Yeah.
So they were on the same label
Punky's Whips.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. Punky's. Yeah, come on. Don't be cheeky now. That was Frank Zappa tearing shreds off poor old Punky. But the band itself was on Casablanca, and there was only two rock bands on Casablanca. One was Kiss and one was Angel, and they never toured the two together, only because Angel would have wiped the stage, and now I'm going to be getting hate mail from the Kiss fans. But it's
Greg Giuffria, dude.
Greg Giuffria, I was about to say. And Pete knows I don't go fanboy. I don't go fanboy, right? With anyone. But I think if I met Greg, I'd probably, there'd be a touch, because it was the first Angel album that just blew my mind, and I would have been 11 or 12 when the first Angel album came out, and the song The Tower, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, and there's just all of that resonant poly synth stuff flying around, and you see the stage shots, and there's Greg, with his arms laid out like Rick Wakeman style with synthesizers everywhere, and behind him there's this memory Moog that is literally, he'd be 6 foot plus. This thing would probably be a 7-8 foot memory Moog on the stage. Could you imagine being the road crew moving that moving that bloody thing around? But sorry, that was my introduction to memory Moog, and I'm actually impressed, Mitch, that you know who Angel is and Greg Giuffria.
I know a lot of bad rock trivia. Angel also had a logo. I know you know this. Angel was
the upside down one. Unbelievable, isn't it?
It was the same upside down. Yeah, somebody drew this amazing logo that was the same when you flipped it.
Yeah, the album, that was the third album. That was the third album they introduced that one. And they had like a mirror image of the band with the Angel logo in the middle, and you could flip the cover and you go like, wow, that was so clever.
But unfortunately, they're probably most famous for that Frank Zappa tune. Frank Zappa famously had this song called Punky's Whips.
Yeah.
That was about the guitar player who apparently was like a preeny, like pretty guy.
All of them were kind of that erogenous type
outfits.
Of look. Yeah. They were the opposite of Kiss. They were supposed to be the opposite.
Right.
Yeah.
it was sort of meant in good fun. And I guess the punky guy had a pretty good sense of humor about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I do know that a lot of people only are aware of Angel because of punky. Thanks, Frank. Oh boy, hang on. I've completely derailed the whole conversation, haven't I? Sorry, I digress. Where were we?
All part of the fun.
You were fanboying over Angel a little bit.
Angel and Greg Zafrio and the modular Moog, yeah. PS3300. I reckon we can move forward a little bit because we've hit 2024. Whew. Hang on, what do we got? CR78. That's the
See, he skipped over it, Dan. See what he did to me?
what did I skip over? Sorry,
what about poor Harmonia?
My pride and joy, and he skipped
Mitchell's masterpiece.
Oh, the Pro Soloist. No, which one is it?
No.
Which?
The one that I was complaining about before when you said I wasn't reading the run sheet, Vin.
Which one? The synthesizer expander module? No, we've spoken about that.
Harmonia.
Oh, the Harmonia.
He's just torturing me.
Oh, sorry.
Jeez, Vin, how old are you again?
Stop. Hey, Mitch.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I reckon this would be a great time now to chat about the last original synthesizer design that you guys have done. See, look, I can do all this in editing. Fuck you all, right? I can fix all of this, right?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Hey, Mitch, I reckon this would be an absolute awesome time that we bring up your last original synthesizer design called Harmonia. Can you give us an overview of that one?
I sure can. So I was kind of given a brief. I don't know if you're going to edit anything out, but so I was kind of given a brief of, design something original.
No, I'll let this one run.
Fantastic. So there was hey, come up with something original, and I didn't have a lot of ideas, but there was something I wanted to expand on that we had done in the past. There was a voltage module called the additive oscillator. And it was based on a verbose modular harmonic oscillator, which itself, I believe, was based on like a 70s Buchla module. And the idea with this module is it's 8 sine waves, and they're all tuned to the harmonic series.
Right.
So first harmonic, second harmonic, so forth. And it's pretty simple, actually. It's just these 8 sine waves, which doesn't sound that interesting on the surface, but what makes it really neat is that it can be modulated so that you can sweep back and forth across the waves. It also has a width parameter, which can also be modulated. So you can hear one of those waves at a time, or you can hear them sort of bleeding onto each other, almost like superimposing a parametric equalizer on top of it.
Right.
If you can think in those terms.
Yep.
So we made a voltage version of this module with just the sine waves, and I love it, and it was really fun and cool. So the idea was like, well, hey, what if we made a polyphonic synthesizer with this concept? So obviously we wanted to expand on it. So the big light bulb moment was, instead of using sine waves, what if we did samples? So James Terrace, our main sound designer, and myself set out to make all these samples. We borrowed some from Dream Synth. We made a lot of original stuff with the modular synths and
hundreds of original samples.
Yeah, we made a lot of samples, and I looped them using Infinity from Antares, if you remember that.
Wow.
I went to some trouble to make that work. I ended up using an emulator, like a vintage Mac emulator. I won't go into all the nonsense I went through trying to get that app to work.
Well, and you couldn't get anything more current to actually do the job for you, or you just liked using that?
There's crossfade loopers, and I did use some of those too, but there's nothing that really does what Infinity does, where it actually takes the harmonic content and sort of morphs it together to make these seamless loops.
And so that whole technique is just dead in the water now. No one actually does it.
Well, so it was from this piece of software. It's called Infinity, and it was out like 20 or 25 years ago, and it was by Antares. Antares put it out, and Antares came out with this other piece of software which had some success. It's called Auto Tune. And so they came out with Auto Tune, and they're like, well, why do we bother?
Everyone's groaning.
Yeah, I am too, believe me. But So because of that, I think they were like, well, why are we bothering with this dumb little looper thing that 5 guys use?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. It just fell by the wayside. So anyhow, so we made this big sample library for it. And Dan and I did some experimenting. And I, again, Voltage Modular being used as sort of a dev platform. I'm like, what if we plug a bunch of samplers into it and I have these awful patches with 1 million sampler modules with the same wave tuned to different harmonic series intervals. And Dan made some sort of mixer module that would sort of let you do what I was explaining, where you can crossfade horizontally, if you will, across these waves. And it sounded great. So that's essentially what Harmonia is. It's a bunch of samples. It's 2 oscillators worth of this. And there are a lot of ways you can modulate across these harmonics, and you can turn each one up individually or down, just set them to static levels, or you can modulate them, or you can combine it. And the amount of sound you can get out of this thing is huge. It sort of feels like using something like a vector synthesizer, but it isn't really. And it's really easy to use. Like, that's what I like about it, because really I'm lazy. So I want to be able to make these complex, crazy sounds, and I don't want to think very hard. So it's super duper easy to make sounds that make you sound like a genius when you're not really. And then the rest of the synthesizer, after that is a pretty straightforward analog synthesizer. So that's Harmonia.
Yep, another unique approach, guys. So that's cool. I actually haven't checked that one out, so I got to dive into that one.
It's a ton of fun, I'm telling you.
Awesome. Now let's. Now we've kind of pretty much covered everything else on the list for 2023, I think. So we're almost up to date. Sync. That is your product download manager.
Yeah. We got to the point where we had so many products and downloading 24 installers to install them all didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, look, everyone's gone that way, and it's kind of good that you guys have done it as well. It kind of simplifies things as long as it's and look, from what I'm gathering from you guys with the attention to detail, I'm betting that one is. You haven't missed any dots, because some of these download installation managers, some of them work really well. Some of them are an absolute pain in the ass, guys. I'm not going to go naming them, but some of them are just, you're thinking of going, did the person who coded that actually use this fucking thing? Because, mate, this is just...
That was like the number one goal with Sync, I think. I mean, I had nothing to do with it, so I can say this kind of off the record. But they did a really nice job, because that was the whole goal. Because we were all like, some of these, just what you're saying, they're like a nightmare. And every time you go to use it, it has to download 15 updates. Of itself before it will even do anything. So they really made the effort to make this just bulletproof, simple, no BS, super easy, super painless, because we all hate when they're a pain in the butt.
Yeah, there's one big update all button in the corner, and you just run the program, hit update all. It installs the latest software, updates everything, and it takes a couple minutes, and you shut down and you're done. We did sort of an analysis of all the different product managers that we were all using in our studios, and all the things that we hated about them. And just came up with the simplest, easiest to use design, and people like it.
Yeah,
thankfully, I think we nailed it.
So I'm not on an island. I thought maybe I was on an island complaining about some of these product download managers, because I seriously just think, and sometimes they work really well for a while, and they come up with the next dot point revision, and they break all of the features that they'd put in, and you kind of go, what the fuck, But I
remember saying early on, like, we'll never have one of those. Those things suck. I hate those things. But it didn't occur to me at the time that, like, one day we might have 25 plugins and you can't install 25 things at once. So.
Yeah, you better do it. Yeah. So let's just quickly go through some of the instruments. CR78, which was that first little square box-looking drum machine thing from Roland. C Rhythm. What CR? What would it stand for? Computer Rhythm Machine or something?
Yes, Computer Rhythm 78. CompuRhythm.
CompuRhythm. That's the one.
And it's most famously known as the drums in the first half of Phil Collins' "In the Air Tonight."
Is that where that's from? Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just beloved drum machine that had never really been properly modeled by any company.
Yep.
Kind of couldn't believe nobody had done it.
So let me guess, Dan. That's in your collection.
It is. I have a CR78 that was actually given to me by Greg Hawkes of the Cars.
Oh, there you go.
One of the ones that they use.
Oh, you names dropper, you.
No, so this is great. So he's a
we probably have to tell the Greg Hawkes story.
Go.
There's a whole story. There's another Vegas story behind how.
Oh no, I didn't mean that story. That's too much to go into. But Dan, Dan and I have some Greg Hawkes stuff.
Yeah, we've got some instruments that belong to. I own Greg Hawkes' original Rev 1 Prophet 5 that he toured the world with.
He toured around with a Rev 1. God, that was brave.
He famously recorded the song "Let's Go," which is maybe one of the most famous Prophet 5 lines on this exact Rev 1 Prophet 5 that I have.
There you go. But those Rev 1s were notoriously unreliable from memory.
That's why he stopped using them. That's why he always used Jupiter 8s later on in their career. You never see him using Prophets because he was just so sick of them blowing up.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so he sold it to me in not working condition, and I got it fixed up.
You got it working.
He signed the back of it. It's one of the highlights of my collection.
Nice.
But he loved the CR78, and he sent it to us and said, "Hey, if you guys want to make a CR78 out of this, I'd love for you guys to do that." And we did. Actually, Mitchell did a whole lot of the work on that, figuring out how the original analog circuits worked and figuring out how to recreate those circuits in order to synthesize all the sounds. And that was just a really, really fun project, because the original CR78 is technically programmable in that you can technically program your own drum sounds, but there are no buttons for entering your own drum sounds. So you have to use either a foot pedal or this weird button that they sold you that you could plug into the back. And then you just have to push the button when you want each drum to sound. And it was notoriously complex. And again, Mitchell sort of took the CR78 layout and figured out how to make it, how to move things around and switch up the layout so that it could be fully programmable. And what we came up with is so fun. All the original analog drum sounds are highly accurate to the hardware, but they're also extremely tweakable. So you can change the pitch and the decay and a bunch of different elements of all the drum sounds. And you can just turn the CR78 into something massive and wild and something that sounds nothing like the original hardware.
It's got pretty heavy-handed effects as well, so you can do some crazy stuff with the effects that are really fun. That was a very fun one for us to do, and we couldn't believe that nobody had done the 78 other than sample collections. Nobody had done a synthesized version.
It also became very popular, which we didn't know if our customers would want a drum machine from Cherry Audio, and we were very pleasantly surprised to see that they did, that they embraced it.
Yeah, and you chose one that is just outside of the typical circle, so to speak.
Again, that's what we look for. We don't. It's not that we won't do popular instruments. We have for example, we have a Mini Moog, and it's an excellent Mini Moog.
Yep.
But we also have a Moog Taurus pedal, which every other company has ignored, and it's one of the best sounding Moog things that was ever made.
For bass, unbelievable.
I have a Taurus.
Okay. So
Yeah.
If you have the original Taurus, it's the bassiest thing. It is amazing.
Yep.
And it just gets ignored. And so those things that get ignored they're the things that we love.
Yeah.
And we don't just love them. I mean, we love them personally, right? We buy these things and collect them, and we love making Cherry Audio instruments out of them because we love the history of these products, of these instruments so much. And the ones that get ignored are some of the best ones out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Taurus was, good old Geddy Lee, playing those insane bass lines with his hands, and then flying away on the Taurus with his feet, and then jumping onto the Mini Moog. And I'm like, oh, man, the guy's a freak. Absolute freak.
Yeah, everyone knows the sound of the Taurus pedals, and yet, for some reason, the major manufacturers have not made plug-in versions.
Yeah, they probably just thought, oh, yeah, it's a mini Moog. Oh, sorry. They probably think, oh, it's just a mini Moog, you know, but it's not. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Right, where are we? Oh, Rhodes Chroma. You guys have got an official collaboration or endorsement. What would be the correct terminology for that? You've got the stamp of approval.
This is just a feather in our cap. We just recently, so we came out with the Chroma, which was a painstaking emulation to do. The Chroma there are so many different modes. There's so much that it can do. And the Chroma is essentially a giant computer. So a lot of what the Chroma does is sort of undocumented in software, and we had to figure out so many things. I'll give you an example, and this is just a little bit of insight into what it takes to do an instrument like this. But the Chroma is velocity sensitive, and it has something like 6 or 7 different velocity tables that you can use. Different, you know, from being highly sensitive to requiring a really hard touch. But these tables are not documented anywhere. They're just somewhere in the software of the Chroma.
Right.
So I had to invent a process. I had to write specialized software to send every MIDI velocity to the Chroma and then analyze the change in volume from note to note for all 127 different MIDI velocity values, so that we could recreate all 6 or 7 of these velocity tables. And yeah, I mean, if you want to be accurate, if you want it to be just like the hardware, then this is what you have to do. You have to measure every possible setting that the Chroma can be set to. And it just required hundreds of hours of painstaking testing and analysis. But we did it so accurately that you can load all the original factory sounds. You can dump sounds directly from the hardware to the software, and they will all sound the same. And in fact, we even made it so you could load original cassette recordings, the original cassette data from the Chroma. You can make a WAV file recording of that and drag it into our Chroma, and it will load all those patches.
That is 100% unique with any of the virtual instrument recreations that anyone's done. And
so when it came out, it caught the attention of the Modern Rhodes company in the UK, and they reached out to us and said, they said, look, we thought about doing our own Chroma, but you've just nailed it. And what do you guys think of putting the Rhodes name on it? And so we did that, and just a few weeks ago we rebranded the instrument as the official Rhodes Chroma. So 40 years later, the Rhodes Chroma is back, and it's an absolute honor for Mitchell and I and everyone at Cherry Audio to be able to say that.
It was quite difficult to do, and Dan spent so much time. Yeah, it actually worked out really well because it happened while I was moving across the country. So I was out for a long time trying to move. So Dan had a lot of time to work on that, and then I got thrown back into making that UI, which was exceptionally difficult.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, actually, I will correct myself because I think that the Roland virtual instruments, I think you can pull in original patch data on those. But, they're the guys that own the code. They didn't have to sit there and work anything out. But I'm pretty sure. So I will correct myself. I think their Jupiter 8 recreation and their JD800, which is one of my digital beauties. Actually, I didn't even ask you whether you own a JD800, Dan, or you just nah.
I do, yes.
Of course you do. Fuck.
Is it dripping red glue, or has that been fixed?
I've never had a problem with it. That's one of the things I worry about when I play it. Is that going to become an issue?
Yeah, I can tell you that mine is absolutely in non-playable condition because of the red dripping glue, and the D70, which I know you own multiple of, Dan.
I'm not a fan of the D70, but I have owned them. That's one of the ones I've let go.
Yeah, the D70 is also copping the red glue as well, which is not what it's known for, but the JD800 was definitely renowned for it. But I have brand new keyboard assemblies. That were part of the Roland warranty replacement part of the Roland out of warranty replacements because of that dreaded red glue problem.
That's great.
Now, they're still sitting there in their boxes sealed since, wait for it, 2012.
Oh, boy. You'll get around to it one of these
Well,
days.
I got to fix it. I got to fix them. The thing is, life got in the way, kids, the whole thing, cars. And I just forgot about my beloved JD800, but I will get
Such
to
a great sounding synth.
Love it.
So fantastic.
Love it.
I love it.
Love it. See, now we're getting sidetracked again. Just real quickly, we just go through some of the releases for this year as well. So you had the Whirlybird, which is Wurlitzer 140. I'm not overly familiar.
So again, when people talk about Wurlitzer electric piano plugins, it's always the 200A, which is certainly a fantastic piano. But the Wurlitzer 140B is a lesser known early model that people that know Wurlitzers, most of them will say it's the best sounding one that was ever made. Okay. And it is. It's a phenomenal sounding piano. We wanted to do a sample based an instrument that was completely sample based. We'd never done one. We'd done things like Harmonia and Dream Synth that are based on short loop samples, but we wanted to do a fully multi-sampled, real complex instrument, and the 140B just seemed like the perfect instrument to do. And I'm happy to say that it's another one of these things where we didn't know if our customers would come along with us on it because they want vintage synths and we wanted to do an electric piano. But we've gotten a lot of really great feedback from people saying, this is a wonderfully playable electric piano, and it really was a lot of fun to do. Yeah. Something different, something a little unique.
Yeah, there you go. And the next one is kind of almost in the same vein. Blue 3 organ. So that was based on, it's a tone wheel organ, GG Audio. I'm not familiar with any of that. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, the real quick version is this lone developer. This guy spent years building a product called Blue 3. It was renowned among people that knew about it, but he was just one guy, and so most musicians out there have just never heard of it. He reached out to us and said, "Look, I don't have time to work on this anymore." As it turned out, it's the favorite B3 organ emulation of our artist, Matt. He owns it. He loves it. So he said, "Look, this is a wonderful sounding organ." And we thought, well, let's buy it. Let's buy the software and redo the interface, put our own spin on it, make it really beautiful. And that's exactly what we did. And I think it's one of the best sounding B3s out there for sure. And at the price that we sell it at, it is by far the best B3 organ you can get for the money.
Yeah, awesome. And look, we've got to the end of I can't believe we've got to the end of the product line.
The end for you, not the end for us.
Yeah, not the end for you guys.
So we just released Atomica.
Yeah, the Atomica. That's the Soviet Polyvox.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was a blast because that is such a unique instrument. I think you skipped over at least the Pro Soloist, which we did a year ago.
Sorry, I did.
Wonderful, weird, quirky ARP synth that's unlike anything else that they ever did. And that's just it was such a huge part of the sound of Genesis.
Right.
So we took that on.
So it's different to the Odyssey.
Oh, very different. Very, just wildly different instrument.
Okay.
And then we have another one coming out in a few weeks, which we can't talk about yet.
I know.
I wish we could because it's really exciting. But
well, the only brief I've got is that it's a massive. Actually, I'm not going to give nothing away. Sorry, because the thing is, I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to edit this, but I reckon the show's going to hit broadcast before you guys release it. So let's just say you got something big coming this month.
We do
in November.
We have something exciting, and once it comes out, you guys will laugh because the timing of this couldn't.
Okay, no.
It had been a couple weeks later. We could talk about it.
That's okay. No spoilers. No spoilers. Now, next on my list was supposed to be source for instruments to be modeled, but we already discussed that all the way through the show because we already know where the source is, Dan. And
yeah, we're just nuts about this stuff. We love these things.
Yep.
And it's when you own as many keyboards as I do, it's really an honor and a joy to be able to share this stuff, to have a purpose for this collection and to be able to share them with so many people.
Well, you're just giving back, and it's amazing, I mean, and look, they do sound incredible. All the ones that I've played with, I've just gone, yeah, these guys are kind of nailing this. And like I said, I think you could charge double the amount, and you could, no one would be saying, "Oh, these things are too expensive."
See, I'm sure that that's true, but our philosophy has always been to charge the lowest amount that we possibly can. Because we're musicians, our friends are musicians. It's not an easy life being a working musician.
No, of course.
And we want to get these instruments into the hands of everyone that wants to play them.
Yep.
We're not looking for top dollar. We're looking for bottom dollar on these things.
Yep. No, that's an amazing philosophy to have. And look, I wasn't putting a negative spin on it at all. But I did mention earlier in the show when they were first released and they were so cheap, I went, well, why are they so cheap?
We knew from the start that we knew that was going to be something that we needed to overcome. If we priced these at the price points we were going for, there were going to be people that would say these can't be good, right? It can't be good at that price.
Well, that's exactly what I thought. I'm going to have. Well, I didn't say they can't be good. I just said my first question was, well, how good could it be at X amount? $40 or $50.
Yeah. And we just said, well, let's just show them.
Yeah.
Right? Every instrument we make is available with a free 30-day demo. You don't have to pay a penny to play with these things. So we just trusted that if we put them out there and people heard them, that they would get what we were going for. And, I'm happy to say that we have won a lot of awards. We've gotten a lot of perfect reviews and awards from major magazines and major websites. And that's great. I mean, that really sort of, it feels great. And it confirms that what we're doing is, extremely high quality, but that's not our motivation. Our motivation has just been to put out the very best products that we can at the very lowest price that we can. And even though the plugin market is very saturated and there's a lot of other companies out there, I'm happy to say that we have made an impression on the market.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And look, you guys are doing it for the love of it.
Yeah. Oh, always.
We talked a lot about when we initially did, with DCO 106 and the perception thing that you were talking about. But it's weird when you're doing software because, you your reaction was, well, it's cheap, so can it be good kind of thing, or it's affordable. And the funny thing to get over is when you're a consumer, you're like, well, yeah, it's cheap, so it has to be cheap, right? But with software, my joke about it is always like, well, there's no such thing as expensive zeros and ones and cheap zeros and ones. That you're just raised, especially if you're our age, to think like, well, a cheap Fender Squier or whatever, guitar
can't be as good as the original one. Yeah, the full blown one. Yeah,
right, because it's made out of cheap. They have to cut corners because it's a physical product. But we don't have to do that, And with us, if we sell twice as many for half as much, it's the same. It accomplishes the same thing. But it's hard to disconnect your brain, and me too. It's hard to disconnect your brain from that sort of inherent wiring of, well, if it's a $200 plugin, it has to be amazing. But yeah, zeros and ones are all the same. It doesn't,
Yeah, and I'll give you a quick story on pricing. I mean, the initial thing was when the DAWs, the whole evolution of the DAWs. If you priced it, and I remember being in marketing meetings and stuff where they just say, I'm saying, you guys, have you looked at actually just dropping the price a little bit? And they're going, no. The whole higher price is actually the perception. It gives everyone the impression that it's actually a better product. I've gone, Now, I'm not going to go naming the company, but you may make a guess. But there was a company that's been around for a while, extremely successful. And they were doing a whole stack of virtual instruments, sample-based libraries, the whole lot, right? And they had this bundle that was like, in Australia, $2,500.
Wow.
All right, $2.5K for all the instruments bundled together, because the individual instruments were, $300, $400, $500, whatever. And then when they grouped it all together, the $2.5 was like maybe $7,000 worth of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. At that $2.5, the piracy for that product was insane. No one was buying it, all right? Then they pivoted. They went, well, hang on, we got $2.5, we're not selling anything, and everyone's just pirating the hell out of it. And then they pivoted, and all of a sudden, that $2,500 product came in at like $800. And literally overnight, we were selling hundreds of these pieces of software. All right. So, from a business perspective, we're all in business, right? So you're going to sell 0 at $2.5, or you're going to sell 100 at $800. The math is going to add up that it's far better going for the other option, right?
That's something we talk about a lot. If you're getting $7,000 worth of stuff for $2,500, or if you're getting $70,000
allegedly, allegedly, yeah.
But I mean, if it's $70,000 or $150,000 worth of stuff for $2,500, none of that matters if you don't have $2,500.
That's right.
Right? It doesn't matter how great of a deal it is if you can't afford it. So
there's also the thing that you don't have a physical cost like you used to. Even, in the 90s or 2000s, if you bought whatever, whether it's a DAW or a plugins weren't really big then, but any piece of software you bought was a CD-ROM.
Yeah, a box.
It's in a custom-made box.
And a manual,
it has
printed
to go
manual.
Through a manual, goes through a distributor who takes a cut, goes to maybe a store who probably is going to charge you money to stick it on an end cap where anyone's going to see it. So, $200 pieces of software made sense then.
Yeah.
But now, well,
now
there's all that's gone.
Yeah.
Now you just buy it straight from us or somebody.
It's interesting. There are some holdouts for that. Like there's like I know a DAW that was, it was originally $6,000 or $7,000, and they were targeting more the mastering, the professional masterers, and I'm doing air quotes here. And then all of a sudden it went from 7 to 3, and then it's, I think it's 1,500, and I still don't think people are buying it, But it is interesting. I know you guys use Logic. I remember Logic being $1,800 to $2,000 here locally.
Oh yeah,
$1,800 to $2,000. Nuendo was $2,000 to $2,500. Cubase was about $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. And every one of them pivoted at some point. And I mean, Logic obviously pivoted in a huge way when Apple bought them. And I'm not even sure what's it worth now, $200 or something, a couple hundred.
Yeah, it's $199. Yeah,
I mean, that's a pivot.
And Mainstage is $30. It includes all the instruments.
Yeah. So look, I remember, with my friends that were very heavily invested in Logic, and they'd spend thousands on this stuff, all the add-ons and
right. You used to have to buy all the Logic instruments, like the SS24 and stuff. It was separate. I remember when it became part of it, and it was like this huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some version of Logic up on, even though I'm a PC a DAW specialist. I did dabble with my Apple DAWs, and I'm quite proficient on Apple as well. And I've got my Logic here, but I can't remember what version it was. It was it was an Apple. It's an Apple package. I've got 2 of them actually. And there's
on Windows?
No. This is on OS X. I did have a Logic on Windows as well. It's probably, it is. It's actually sitting on my shelf. But
5.5.
5.5. It was actually quite good from memory. But this is an Apple. Release, but with all the instruments. And one thing that I remember that it was seething. I'm like, going, okay, I'm going to install all of this, and it's going to ask me where it's going to dump the 60 gigabyte worth of instruments, isn't it? It's going to ask me for the secondary directory, isn't it, Apple? Because you guys, you understand that we musicians, we can't have the samples landing on the fucking system drive. We need it on the sample drive. No,
right.
60 gigabyte of just shit dumped onto the system drive, and then I've gone, where to put it? I had no way of.
There's ways to get around. I think you can do it now.
You can do it now.
Ways to get around it.
But do you remember those dark days? Oh,
yeah, but there were ways you could get around it. Dan's going to kill me for like just blabbering about this nonsense. So yes. That's my answer.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, we're segued into Logic. How did I do that? That was me. Sorry.
This is extra bad that we're talking about Logic because we are Acoustica, makers of Mixcraft, a fine DAW.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys.
But the only reason I'm not a Windows guy. That's the thing. Mixcraft is Windows, so that's if it was a Mac thing, I'd use it.
Well, I mean, you guys were proudly boasting at the start that you're Mac guys, so I just yeah.
Dan isn't.
Oh
No.
Yeah, that was just Mitch, which is why we're going to cut all his stuff out of the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Bloody Mac. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You're Microsoft. Oops.
Yeah.
Sorry about
that's
that.
okay. Well,
That's
hey,
fine.
you're sleeping with the enemy.
I'm not very pleased with Apple. If that makes you feel better.
Vin knows I'm all good.
Yeah, Pete's fine, and Pete understands that even though I'm a Windows and PC DAW specialist, that I have my few qualms with some directions that Microsoft
Okay, Vin,
take
we
at
are
times.
not going to go there.
We're not
on this
going.
podcast.
No,
We're already
no.
like 4 hours into it.
No, we're not. It's not. It's not. We'll get the rant button out again.
Yeah. Where's
Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, where's Chris? Okay, I think we should move on, right? So we've covered that. And now I've got listed here any instruments on the wish list for future developments or releases. But that's probably a bit cheeky because if you guys got some cool instruments coming up, you don't want to go blabbing a.
And we know there is a cool instrument coming.
Well, we know there's one coming in a couple of weeks, but
Yeah, we don't like to talk too much about what's in development.
okay, can I send you I'll send you my wish list.
Sure, yeah, please.
Because I reckon you own it.
We don't really have that much on the back burner.
Well, I guarantee you anything that I can come up with, Dan owns.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I mean, there are times when there's like 5 other things that we're gonna do, but right now it really isn't one of those times.
Yeah.
We really don't have that much on the list. Right
And
now.
look, and Pete's hanging. He's going, what was the one that he didn't have? Because we brought that up at the start of the
that's right.
show.
Oh, yeah.
And are you still there, Pete?
I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to give you 3 guesses.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Come on.
Which one Dan doesn't have?
Yeah, and it's been in recent discussions.
I
Come
have
on.
no idea. Is it one of the plugins that you've created though?
Nope.
No, it's just random awesome synthesizer that you don't have.
Yeah, it's one of our bucket list ones. Yours and mine, Pete. Apart from the Matrix 12.
It's excessive. That's your clue. It's very excessive.
It's very excessive, yeah. Very expensive.
Geez, is it analog or is it?
Nope.
You're not talking like Fairlight expensive, are we?
No,
Really, I have no idea, Vin.
not Fairlight expensive. A little lower, but still pretty expensive.
And pretty untouchable.
Yeah,
We'll put him out of the misery, guys.
but you'll know what it is.
I say you've got the CS80, which is up there. You've got Jupiter 8. Those are 2 of the.
No, but
more
it's analog, bud.
expensive
Analog. You're going the wrong direction.
ones. What's the other one that's not the Fairlight? That was so.
Synclavier, maybe?
Synclavier there. Yeah.
No.
He's probably got one of those tucked away in the back.
I don't. I was recently offered one. I've been offered them.
Greg offered us one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been offered at least 4 of them over the years, and I won't touch them because they're all broken. Every one of them.
And you don't have a Fairlight either, do you? Well, you do.
I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Oh, there's a couple more.
Let's see. There's a DX1. That's pretty excessive. It's like you could surf on it.
Oh, there's one I didn't
Right.
throw at you,
It's not
Dan.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good guess. I don't own a DX1.
Oh, there we found another one.
I've owned a
Yeah.
DX5 and a DX7, and I have a DX7 too that also belonged to Chick Corea.
Yeah. There you go. The name
of course.
dropping again. Good on you,
But I
Dan.
have never owned a DX1.
And there's all the vector synthesis stuff that was
Prophet
was
VS.
equivalent.
Oh, do you
Yeah,
own a
Prophet
Prophet? Do you got a Prophet VS, Dan?
I think I own every vector synth.
Okay,
so
just
I
stop.
have a VS,
Stop.
a few wave stations,
Station
an
AD.
SY22, an SY35. I've even got a Chronos, which I think still does.
I stole Dan's CG33.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
God.
right.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we put him out of his misery?
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of other excessive digital synthesizers.
Come on.
You're going to be like, oh, yeah, when we tell you.
It's not like the EMU module or something.
No. It came up in the last show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're expecting me to remember things from week to week?
Let's give him a good hint, like 90s. It's 90s.
It's 90s and it's German.
90s and Germany.
I'm going to put him out of his misery.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. Right?
It's the Waldorf Wave.
The Wave.
The Wave. Because we were discussing it with Peter for
right.
Ad infinitum. Yes, yeah. The Microsoft, God, the Waldorf Wave.
Yeah.
I've never owned a Waldorf Wave. I've never owned a PPG Wave. And that I know is at the top of Mitchell's
2.2, 2.3. That came up in the discussion in the earlier one. And here's another one you guys have got to find. Dan, I've got a challenge for you.
Sure.
PPG Realizer.
A guy I used to play with in a band had one.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Did they? I thought it was vaporware.
No, he had one. He didn't have it when I knew him, but he had one, and he had I think he had a PRK with it. He had a whole mess of it, and he bought it cheap. Like, it was one of those deals.
The Wave, though, is a spectacular one and sort of fits into future podcast guests that we're not going to talk about just yet.
Yes, it does.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it does. But the Realizer, I remember seeing the ad in Keyboard Magazine going, what the fuck is this thing? You know, and because I think it had a touch screen. I'm pretty sure. Did it have a touch screen, Mitch?
No, it had like buttons around the perimeter of the
That's
screen.
right.
It had like a vector screen, like asteroids.
And it was but you could draw waveforms on it and stuff, couldn't you? It was
No. I don't think you could.
I've completely forgotten what it was there. I just remember it was just
the picture of it. Holy crap.
Yeah, have I accurately described it?
It looks like a piece of medical equipment. I don't know.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, I'm flipping through my Keyboard Magazine and it comes to this page and it's like PPG Realizer. And then I remember reading about it and I've gone, what the fuck is this thing? And I didn't even realize that it actually.
That's wild. I've never seen one of those.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. Maybe he didn't have that. He had, what was the other Waldorf thing that they made?
Apparently, the Realizer costs $65,000. So,
my goodness, maybe he didn't have that. I know he had some of the crazy Waldorf stuff that went beyond PPG.
Yeah, Waldorf has made some really cool things, but
yeah, I mean that was the only thing above the PPG 2.2, 2.3 from memory. That was the only thing. But there you go. Sorry, I've gone and hijacked the whole conversation again.
No, that's good, but thank you for putting me out of my misery and letting me know it was the Wave.
Yeah, it was the Wave.
The Wave is definitely a bucket list synth, though. That's gorgeous.
I'd love to own one.
I don't know.
I would. They're huge.
Did I tell you guys I had an amazing Wave story because there's only one ever landed in Australia? I'm not sure if I told you in the pre-chat. No,
let's hear it.
No. Because I just did it in the last show.
Yeah, we had it in the last show, so
gotcha.
Good for follow-up.
Okay, but now I'm going to put these guys out of misery, right? So one landed in the country, real short story, right? One landed in the country, and one of my best friends at the time had bought it, and it was kind of it had been shipped from Germany and went to the Australian distributor, made its way to Melbourne, all right? And we opened it up and it was wrapped in this really heavy plastic to protect it and everything else. And we kind of very carefully unwrapped the plastic and the thing was smashed from the LCD screen to the top right-hand corner. We never even got to turn it on.
That's awful.
Yeah. So
it's very upsetting.
There's the Wave story. Yeah. Again. So now, real quick, because, oh boy, I'm looking at the time. Yeah, this is another marathon, Pete. So I knew it was going to be another marathon.
Yeah, my ass is sore.
Yeah, I see you. Thanks, mate. End user community interaction and feedback. So, I mean, that kind of covers. You guys have got a forum, haven't you?
We've got a forum. We've got an active Facebook page. There's a Cherry Audio user group and a Voltage Modular user group, and we try to interact with all of them. We have. I don't want to be boastful, but I think we have the best customer support in the industry. People are always amazed that they write to us with questions and they get a response within 20 minutes. And, people aren't used to that these days. No. They expect to not hear back from a company for weeks, if ever. But, this is really important to us, interacting with our customers and listening to what they want and, making sure that what we're putting out is what our customers want from us. So yeah, we do our best.
And what's the general vibe on the forum? Is it generally good, or do you have your occasional noisemakers? It would probably be the best way for me to describe it.
I think like the not nice people are always the loudest, so it can seem like there's more of that than there really is. But
yeah,
when we release a new product, really, it's pretty amazing. Like, and it's easy to take it for granted, especially if there's one naysayer guy, it always sticks in your head. But really, people are generally speaking super positive and supportive, and then really cool and nice. And it's like sometimes we get correspondence, like direct correspondence to tech and stuff, where it's just amazing how nice they are and how much they appreciate it.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, it is. It's an honor. I mean, people really seem to be very loyal and appreciative of the work that we're doing, and that is really cool because as I've tried to stress during this chat, these things are not easy to do well, and it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and a lot of it is really tedious, detail oriented. Minor stuff that we're trying to get perfect or as close to perfect as we can. And so, yeah, I'm happy to say that our customers are amazing.
Yep. So you don't have customers, you have fans.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah. That came up in the show and numerous times because we've discussed just the dynamics sometimes of how toxic some of the forum and the feedback and can be. But and then some companies have end users, some companies have fans. It sounds like you guys have fans.
You know what's funny?
Well, it kind of works both ways. Okay, Dan.
I was just going to say, back in, I think, 2017, when we first announced our first product, Voltage Modular, we hadn't released it yet, but we announced that it was coming at NAMM, that we were going to be showing it off at NAMM.
Mm.
And there were so many people that responded by saying, oh, this won't be very good. This is going to be disappointing. It probably won't work on my Mac. It probably won't be compatible with my DAW. And there was just there was a surprising amount of negativity just with the product announcement. And all those people were wrong. It was, compatible with everything. It was inexpensive. And they all sort of changed their tune once they tried it and said, oh, this is great. And the price is great. And it's compatible. And but just that sort of weird internet reaction where people are so primed not to like things.
Yeah.
We knew going into this, as I said earlier, that at the price we were going to put products out at, there were going to be people that were instantly dismissive. And part of that is if you've spent thousands of dollars on a hardware synthesizer and then a piece of software comes out for $40 that says that this sounds pretty much the same, there are going to be people that are very, very defensive because they've invested the money and they are going to say, instantly without ever trying it, there's no way that this is going to sound like the hardware.
Yeah.
And we're the first to say, every piece of hardware sounds different. Our software may not sound exactly like your unit because we're modeling our unit. And, we're not perfect and we make mistakes and, that happens. But we do have the hardware sitting right next to us, and we work really hard at this. Yeah, exactly. And if our software isn't perfect, it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Dan and I have a running joke about somebody will see a demo of our product, whatever, and they'll say, my brother's cousin's uncle played in a band in 1978 and I heard one at soundcheck and your blah, blah, blah sounds nothing like it. And you always want to say, and I've learned the hard way, you don't get into it. But yeah, I have one sitting right here. I have the real one here and I had our plugin and we went back and forth making the exact same sound for hours, driving my wife crazy going ding, 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 ding. So your recollection of 15 years ago probably isn't as accurate as my right here in front of your face. And another thing we see, though, that like Dan was talking about, that sort of being defensive of owning the real thing, we see it with software too. That's like a lot of the negativity you see. It's not like some arbitrary, hey, your thing is just bad. We see a lot of like so-and-so's blah, blah, blah is the ultimate one and yours can't compare. And you can tell it's that sort of psychological investment. And I paid all this money for my brand X, whatever. And now you're coming along and messing with that. It's like, well, not really.
And it's 1/4 of the price,
There's that too.
Yeah.
But we have fans. There are definitely people who And I'm positive this exists with all the big players, right? Like people will just buy our stuff, just like any new instrument, almost any new instrument we come out with, they just buy it because they like Cherry stuff, which is awesome.
Yep.
It is. That's amazing.
And I'm sure it's the same with Arturia and Yuhi and whoever else, that this is their brand and they buy stuff from this brand.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of surprising to us because all of our products have this free 30-day trial. There is no logical reason why anyone should buy the product without trying it.
First listening to it, of course.
Whenever we release a new product, there are people who race each other to be the first one to buy it. It's amazing. I mean, it's a huge honor, and it makes me feel like all the work that we've put into this is really paid off because we do have so many people out there that seem to really love what we do and are really loyal to Cherry Audio. We're just trying to put out good musical instruments because we love this stuff. That's our only real motivation. But it is really, really cool. There have been certain moments like when Rhodes reached out to us and said, hey, we want to put the Rhodes name on your chroma, where all of a sudden our chroma is part of the history of the Rhodes chroma. That's amazing. Right. Or when we did the Octave Cat, we worked with the original designer of the Octave Cat in the 1970s. We worked with him on both the design and the sound and got his seal of approval on what we did. And so our Octave Cat is the Octave Cat. It is approved by Carmine, who invented the original instrument in the 70s. And those moments are just amazing to us.
Yeah. Look, and for what it's worth, guys, I've got some of the other the modeled virtual instruments from some of the bigger players, and they're all great.
Yeah, they are.
They're all great. But here's my but the first time that I fired up one of your synths, straight away I just went, there was that, I remember this. Where the other ones I'm going, they're great, but I didn't get the, I remember this, So whatever it is that you're doing in that modeling level, I can actually, it's just fantastic. Now, the other thing that I should, and seeing we're talking about the community and interaction and that type of stuff, that dude that does your walkthroughs, we spoke about him yesterday. What was his name?
Tim Shoebridge.
Oh, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah, mate, that guy, that guy kills me how good he is.
His videos are fantastic.
Yeah, because you know what it is? You could just feel that he loves what he's doing, right?
Yep.
And he gives you a really honest appraisal of what he likes about it, and all the rest of it. Maybe, this could be a little bit better here or whatever. But I sit through his walkthroughs. I've sat through a couple of them, start to finish. I've gone, he's awesome, right? And I'm hearing the instruments as well, right? And I've gone, yep. So anyone that really, look, download the instrument and start playing it yourself, right? But if you want to get an in-depth on the creative process of what you guys have done and the design and everything else, go watch, who was it? Sorry, Tim. Yeah,
Tim.
Go watch
Shoebridge.
Tim's videos.
What's really cool about that is the whole way that happened, the way we met Tim, is he started developing modules for Voltage Modular. He created a series of modules for the platform. And I think he reached out with some questions, and I was familiar with his videos. I thought his work was great. So when he contacted us, it was like, oh, wow, hey, that's Tim Shoebridge.
Yeah.
And it turned out, he liked, he's a hardware guy, and he's not a big fan of most software, but he really likes what we do.
I think they're very honest appraisals of the software that his walkthroughs are just phenomenal. And he also reminds me, I think I told you guys yesterday, he also reminds me of a really close friend here in Melbourne that, and literally, if you put him in the same room and did a screen split, you'd be going, hang on, are these guys, is it this? It's almost like doppelganger, right? That friend of mine in Melbourne, these guys, you could literally go, they're either brothers or they're doppelgangers.
Tim is one of us. He has an encyclopedic love of vintage synthesizers. And so when we give him one of our forthcoming products, we don't have to tell him what this is or what the history is. He already knows it.
Yeah, he does it. Yeah.
All those videos he writes himself. We tell him almost nothing about the product.
Yeah.
He just takes off with it and does an incredible job.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the latest one with Atomica, and he had a Polyvox behind him.
Yeah. Yeah. He loves this stuff as much as we do.
It was just out of focus, but yeah, it was a Polyvox, it was there, Yeah, amazing. One last thing, guys, because we are kind of, this is marathon. One last thing, your thoughts on the current landscape with music technology. And I mean, that's probably going to encompassing AI, more. So is AI, do you think it's going to be impacting anything that you guys do in regards to, or how you guys do things?
Gosh, I don't know. We walk this really funny line of being, creating cutting edge, brand new software that's based on 45-year-old, very old hardware.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I've worked in music technology for my entire career. And I think the reason why we are drawn to these older instruments is that all the technology, as amazing as it is, it doesn't necessarily make better music than the old technology. And so when it comes to music and composition, there's something about, the immediacy of turning on an analog synthesizer and moving some sliders and creating a new sound that is not necessarily something you can do with a D50 or a Korg M1 or the much newer, everything since then, which are technologically amazing instruments, but don't have the immediacy to it.
Yeah, they don't have the hands-on. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, look, AI is going to be writing songs and composing music, and we're probably not going to tell the difference. And you're going to be able to feed your vocal recording through AI and have it come out sounding like it was recorded in $1 billion studio. And all of this stuff has potential to make amazing music, but none of it is a replacement for talent and hard work.
100%. Yeah, 100%, Dan. That was very well put, actually. Look, I've said a few times, we've got to fight back against the robots, especially with the generative stuff. I don't mind using the creative side of AI, which I use with some plugins, especially with, the podcast production, which I've mentioned multiple times. But, whether it's noise reduction and voice isolation stuff and all of that, that generative, the creative side of AI in our music realm is amazing. And I use it every day, all right? So that stuff I really like. The generative stuff kind of creeps me out a little bit, but I think there's been a half reasonable pushback against some of the I'll call it non-ethical approaches that have kind of pushed forward on the immediate rush to it. And I think that's going to taper off a bit. But the whole thing is that it has to come back to a human element, as Dan said. And I agree 100% that's what we need to do. We need to focus more on the human element side of things.
There's also an interesting argument of, why do you want to automate certain things? Like you're saying, for noise reduction, okay, that makes sense. But as far as composing a song, well, as Dan knows, I love doing little songs. I'm not a guy who just has a room full of synths for the sake of having synths. I record songs. I want to write a song. I don't want somebody to do it for me. It'd be like, and I want to make my own sounds, even whatever I'm doing, even if it's not as good. I don't care. It's me. It's what I do. And even back to I remember there was this whole bombardment of vocal processing plugins or things where you could sing one line and it automatically harmonizes 6-part harmony. I want to sing 1 million tracks of vocals on my songs. That's it's kind of, to me, it's like, well, you could have an AI robot that would go to the movie theater and watch the movie for you. What's the point?
Yeah.
I want to do this stuff. I want to make music. And Yeah, obviously this isn't, I'm not thinking in terms of, will it be a hit and I can somehow make money off this? But yeah, it comes to a point of like, why would you want to automate that?
Yeah, but that's because we're creatives. We are the creatives, right?
Yeah, at some point we all picked up a guitar or sat at a piano and wrote our first song and went, wow.
Or sound design, anything that's creative. The thing is that the people that are actually pushing what I call the generative AI area, they're not creatives. They're not musicians. They don't give a fuck about any of us. They're just sitting there trying to work out an algorithm where they can sit there and generate a whole stack of money very, very quickly. And and this is the discussions that we've had ongoing. And we don't need to cover it again. But I think we're probably pretty much on the same page when it comes to the whole generative automatic song generation stuff, and where are they sourcing the material and all the rest of it. And I don't want to go boring the listeners again because I'm going on ad infinitum about it, but I think there's at least some pushback on that, and it has to come back to the humans, and we have to push back a bit from the robots. Yeah,
in the end, all this technology that we have, whether it's compressors and reverbs or virtual synths or whatever it is, these are all tools that 100%. In the hands of a good musician can be used to make even better music. But none of they're tools like a guitar or like a piano. There's something that has the potential to be used to make great music, and we can't ever forget that it's the part where we use the tools to make the music. That's where the fun is. That's where the magic is. If the tools are writing the music for us, then we're using them wrong.
Yeah. But like I was saying, the people that are actually utilizing those generative songs, they're not musicians. They might be, they just might need a bit of music for library music, bit of for an ad or something.
Sure.
And
that's taking a job away from a musician, and that can be frustrating.
Yeah, and there we go, and that's the slippery slope we've been discussing.
Right.
Oh boy!
But it's always been that way. As soon as synthesizers came out, the musicians union started filing lawsuits.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to take jobs away from saxophone
from the orchestra.
Exactly. So, the march of progress, it doesn't slow down.
Yeah.
It's not going
from the country orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, switched on country. Now I'm going to go looking that up, guys.
I walk the line. Look it up.
Is that going to ruin me? Is it going to be one of these things that, when they say you can't unsee it, is this one of these things that I won't be able to unhear?
You know how much you like synthesizers? You might like them a little less.
Okay, so switched on country, walk the line. I've got to write this down. Walk the line. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I own the synthesizer that made that song.
And if it actually scars me, can I send you a bit of a blast on the email?
I would be honored. Yes.
Oh, that's a beautiful cow statue on the cover of this album.
Yeah.
It's nice.
There's a Canadian pressing of it as well that has I think a very sexy lady on the cover.
Sitting on the cow?
No, it's just different artwork. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with the music.
Sitting on the cow. She might be wearing cowboy boots, It's just, cowgirl.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, guys. We've got to the end of the tether.
Hey, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we haven't finished just quite yet. Because I was saying, is there anything else you guys want to chat about?
Hey Mitchell, what are you going to have for lunch today?
It's 5:00 in Connecticut.
Oh, that's right. You live in a different time zone.
All right. That's right. Well, we're all in different time zones. Spare a thought when I started, guys.
That's true.
There you go.
Oh, Mitch and I are in the same time zone.
Yeah, Mitch, Mitch are in the same time zone. Dan is, in the middle of the desert somewhere, and I'm
West Coast.
I'm at the bottom arse end of the world. Here in Melbourne. On that note, guys, that has been awesome. I've just had an absolute ball today. Thank you very, very much for your time and energy.
Yeah.
Again.
It's been fun.
Thanks for having us. And if you ever want us to come back, just ask. We'd be happy to.
Oh, 100%. And that's 2 days in a row that we've actually just sat there and laughed our heads off for we didn't go for 3 hours yesterday, but I reckon we put in a good hour yesterday, and I'm going, look, we should stop talking about that because we need to have some stuff to talk about on the show. Thanks again to Pete as well. Thank you for co-piloting this one again with us. And I think we can close off on that now, guys.
All right.
Okay, on to the next.